Welcome one and all to LZS Live, the show whose name actually consists of a acronym and a lie. Because this is not fucking live. This is basically, we should have called it Uncut, but that would have sounded weird, and we would lose all of our Jewish viewers at that point. So I'm not gonna change it. Let's keep it LZS Live, because at one point it will probably be live. Today we will be redoing something that we pre-recorded, but there were some issues. Let's just say that. This time we're gonna do the topic, the future of gaming. So I brought in some epic gamers who are now dying of suffocation because they're fucking laughing at this.
Sorry, my official title is...
I'm gonna throw in the random fact, one of us is probably uncut.
Oh god, stop!
So we have here, Griff has returned for the second time around, and then we also have Weird Wolf.
Hello, I'm here too. They dragged me into this. Something about
I did nothing. I'm a third... God! Yeah, when we do the live portion of this podcast at some point in the future, we'll just get Weird to have his circumcision at the very same time.
Ouch.
I think we know the answer to his previous statement.
Let's talk about this later.
I actually wonder how painful that is now, like a circumcision.
No. Different topic. We're not talking about
That's not the topic this time. We're going to talk about the future of gaming, like we said. But before we move into the future, or even the current, we're going to actually go back to the past. And we're going to have everyone basically introduce how they got into gaming. So I would like to start with Griff.
Aww.
Because he was about to drink.
I know, you bastard! That's why you picked me! Oh, you bitch. Okay, how did I start getting into gaming? I'm trying to remember what I said the last time we spoke about this. But,
Did the way you got into gaming change, perhaps?
The story has progressed.
Distorting realities.
Life has continued on beyond the previous iteration of this podcast.
He previously had a stroke and forgot everything he ever had in his childhood.
Honestly, that's why I'm buffering this conversation, because I'm trying to remember the story that I told you last time, and I fully cannot remember it.
As we're speaking, he's having a stroke.
Story of my life. Every time I'm speaking, I'm having a stroke. I'm pretty sure my first games console was... What came first, DS or PS2?
Jesus Christ.
I fully can't... I know, that's
hard
the
question.
thing. I can't...
It's a PS2.
I can't remember.
I'm pretty sure.
Is it the PS2? Okay,
sure.
so my first console ever was a PS2, and I got The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe on it. Thank you, I'm a cool kid. I don't know. It was just this thing where I didn't game when I was like a really young kid. I just watched a lot of telly and played with Lego like a fun child. But then I think my parents were like, let's get him a toy for boys, because we love male assigned categories of fun in this world.
Wait, so Legos aren't for boys?
I was about to say what.
Not.
That sounds like some uber macho shit.
You guys
Legos are too girly. Let's get him a video game where he shoots stuff.
Yeah.
What about The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe?
But I was one of those. I was bought an 18 rated game because I wasn't playing 18 rated games. Like my parents were like, Griff, play something more adult, and I was like, no, I'm having fun playing kids games. Fuck off.
What's wrong with you?
I was like 13. I was like 13, and they were like, "Here, have this 18 rated game." Like, what do you want me to do with this?
Honestly, I was pretty sure if I was ever gonna pick up an 18 rated game while I was 13 years old, my parents would assume I would do like a school shooting.
That's the thing. I think my parents saw me as so innocent. They were like, "We need to crack him somehow. We need to make him prepared for the real world. Here, play this Call of Duty or whatever." I never touched the fucking game in my life. I played it once, and I was like, "Nope, I'm going back to Lego Star Wars."
That's something that my parents never looked at, like the labels for like video games. What age is it for? They were just like, game.
No, mine
Enjoy
never.
it.
No, mine never. But I could name a good amount of my friends whose parents were like, "You were never allowed this game until you were a certain age."
That's so bad.
Parents.
I mean, especially that's maybe a different topic. So let's try to not move too much into that. So you were saying The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, and then they tried to get you some...
so I got a PS2, and then I just fell in love with gaming, and I don't know what it was. Like, I was a very casual gamer. I wasn't very intense. I couldn't game for huge amounts of hours every day or even every week. But then I got to my high school, and then it's just like, I don't know what it was. I think it was the explosion of YouTube gaming. I was like, oh my god, gaming's so fun. And then here we are today, and it's an addiction, and it gets rid of a lot of my bank account, and it's bad. It's real bad. I'm poor. So,
well, the explosion of YouTube gaming, when was that? Like, was it like, I try to remember, was it like, it's not really all that super long ago, isn't it?
For me, I really got into it in the back end of 2012. Like, that was the start of, yeah. That was the back end of it, and then I was like, oh my god, look at all these people like getting famous because of video games, and I was like, wait, the games are really fun, and then I was like, oh my god, I can play these games, and then here we are today.
That's exclusive.
Connect the dots. Griff was really slow at those connect the dots games, where it's like,
yeah,
oh,
always like drew something
the thing
different.
Is, honestly,
I can play those games too.
I really wish that what I said was a joke, but it's not. That's how my journey of it was. It's like, oh my god, they're famous. Video games. Oh my god, video games. Oh my god, I can play video games. That's how it went.
God,
I'm not even kidding.
You were really one of those kids that like colored in crossword puzzles.
Colored in crossword.
I don't think I went that far, but you know dot to dot. You know dot to dot.
Yeah.
Yeah, all I'm saying is it wasn't SpongeBob at the end of it. That's all I'm saying.
Jesus Christ.
Something horrible. It looks SpongeBob. It's like a penis all of a sudden.
A fucking mutant.
How did you even get to that?
His eye was down here, but his legs were there. His arm was there.
So yeah,
anyway,
so it went from what you said from the PS2, and you also had a DS, I guess, then at that point.
Yeah, DS. Yeah, but they were things that I didn't, or I'm not aware that I asked for. They were just stuff that my parents got because they were like, oh,
play more games.
Play more games. And now to this day, they're like, why have you spent like $1,000 on a gaming PC? Because you made me do this 15 years ago, and now here we are.
So your parents are like the gaming version of like, oh, we caught you smoking cigarettes, now we're gonna make you smoke the entire package.
Exactly. That's what happened. But in a more less going to kill me kind of way, which I don't know if is a positive or a negative, but that's up for your decision to make.
I mean, it could kill you if you just sit stationary. Well, never mind.
Yeah.
Whatever. So weird. How did you get into gaming?
That's a really good question. Well, definitely the first game I ever played was OG Tetris. I was like 3 years old. I have no idea why I had that. And afterwards, it basically got right straight into first and second generation Pokemon. That was actually the first games I've ever really put time into. For a long time. That was when I was like, let's say, 5 to 9 years old. And then similar to Griff, I kind of fell out with it. Didn't really play games that much at all. And then eventually what got me back into it was Kingdom Hearts for the PlayStation 2. That was way after the first Kingdom Hearts was released. I think they were already at the 5th or 6th game in the series. And I loved that game. I loved that so much. I got to use PlayStation 2. Played the original Kingdom Hearts games, and of course got into other games as well. Eventually got a PlayStation 3. And that's where I realized I really enjoy story-based games. I really love the Uncharted games. Of course, Kingdom Hearts has a lot of story aspects to it as well. I do remember I also had in the middle of it a DS, and that's something like when everybody was for some reason playing fucking Nintendogs. I'm pretty sure all of these dogs.
I was literally about to say, if you didn't have Nintendogs, I don't think you can call yourself a gamer. Yeah. Okay, I'm just saying.
It's the Tamagotchi conundrum, right? All of these dogs are dead.
I hope not. But I did lose my cartridge to that game. We're talking 15 plus years ago, and I'm pretty sure they're still really mucky right now. Like, they've died. The dogs are dead.
Exactly.
But they died in their own filth.
Yeah, but like after getting through the PlayStation 2, 3, 4, and then eventually PC gaming, I've never really stopped. And of course, I later started doing it for YouTube as well, like mentioned, with the rise of YouTube gaming a little bit later than that. And yeah, that's where I also started developing a brain and actually getting a little bit interested in the industry behind it. And hey, here we are.
Okay. Well, then I have to tell my own story as well. I actually started with the classic Nintendo, the NES. The first one was Super Mario Brothers.
Just
like
to
the
let
first game.
listeners know, Bram's really old. Just to let you know.
Wow, thank you. Thank you. That's a compliment, I guess.
You're welcome.
Watch your mouth, young boy!
Did you still have punch cards for computers?
I actually never saw those though. No, that's something I've never seen.
What about floppy disks?
I've seen floppy disks though. Yes, I've seen
I
those.
also had floppy disks.
Oh, we all have floppy disks.
See, everyone's still on. What the fuck are you even talking about then? Anyway, back to the NES. Yeah, there was Super Mario Brothers 1. I never had the second game, but I had the third game for some reason. And then there were some other games that I had on that, which I don't really remember all that much of. At the same time, I also had the classic huge ass fucking Game Boy that if it's like dark, you don't see shit on it. It's like, yeah, very handy. So when you have to play it, when you want to play at night, you just still have to keep your light on and that shit. So yeah, most of those games just like, what was it, like those fairly simple concepts, obviously. Then it changed up to the N64 and the PlayStation 1. I didn't have any of the things in between, like not a Super Nintendo. So it's just like from a NES. I skipped the SNES. I knew that I played the SNES at some people, like at the neighbor's house or something. But then I went straight for a PlayStation 1 and the N64, on which, I mean, I had some iconic games as well, like both the Legend of Zelda games that were on there, the N64 versions. So there was both Majora's Mask and Ocarina of Time. So I enjoyed those games, and then there were a lot of other stuff on the PlayStation. Well, that's more of an... I don't really have much of a memory of what was on the PlayStation at that point. I just know that I played a lot of PlayStation 1 games, but I think I had a bigger variety of them, and therefore I have less of a memory of what these individual games actually were.
Probably Crash. Did you have Crash?
Yeah, I did have... again, with the same as with Mario. I had Crash 1 and Crash 3 for some reason. I think I only got Crash 2 like later on when the PlayStation 2 was already out. So that's also... I went over to that PlayStation 2. After that, the Xbox 360 and some PC shit. And then I went back to the PlayStation with the PlayStation 4. And so I've been gaming that entire time as well. I have had some moments where it's like I just have like... where it's not even a weekly thing, where there's like a week or something that I may not even play any games at all. Like there have been periods like that, which I guess, I don't know, they were somewhere during college as well, because there were like nights where you, well, in college you're more likely to go out and do stuff in the evening as well. So
very true.
I guess that's
the thing. Like I think now because it's such like a big hobby or something that I love so much, I have got to game at least probably once a week. Not to like mainly like I'll go insane. Like it's not like I've had caffeine or without coffee or something. I'm like I need this. But now
Context
it's
is
just so
terrible
part of me,
on
like,
coffee.
just I see like
I forgot.
I see like a doctor.
I forgot.
God damn it.
Yeah, it's a fun fact. But yeah,
and I also imagine like a just running towards Griff. Weird already touched on something, and it wasn't Gamer Seaman. He touched on the fact that there was also a bit of an evolution in games when it comes to storytelling, and that's one of the things that we have seen when we go back and look at the video games from the past and all the way to video games in the present, and it will probably still be something that evolves into the future as well. But we have seen a evolution on that front, and I think now I may just mix up some stuff, but I've seen some of the games that we've all kind of played. I mean, we all played the some of the Uncharted games as well, so that's a good example of something cinematic where storytelling is actually integral, and it works very nice with the gameplay itself. It all like flows very well together. So when did you get actually, because I know that a lot of us, the games that we said in the beginning, Tetris, very rudimentary, there's no story, just game, just basically comparable to a party game or something. And then, well, Griff already actually started with like a more story-based game, and that because it was based on a movie, right? So this may be a bit of a stupid question, but when did you first make that click? Like, oh, video games can actually tell stories as well.
When when not based on movies.
Yeah, maybe that's a good.
I was like,
maybe
oh
that's a
my
good
God,
caveat
an
to
original
add.
idea.
Yeah, to add to the question.
To be fair, there's plenty of movie tie-in games, like for example The Lion King on, I think it was Game Boy Advance, which has absolutely no story at all,
Yeah.
just basically piggybacks off of it, and still a good game.
It's basically all the NES
I think
games
the-
as well that are all the movie
Kind of,
tie-ins that were on the NES were also just they had no story. They were just like, here, do some platforming
Yeah,
shit.
exactly. Or infamous example, of course, Atari, E.T. Ah,
Yes.
it's a fun game.
You know what? Sorry, this is so off topic, but I really miss movie tie-in video games. They stopped being produced like back in 2014, and we haven't had another one since.
I still remember when they turned
I-
the last Harry Potter into a third-person shooter. That was a weird time.
Exactly! Exactly, that's what I miss! The juiciness of this crap that we get given to us! Oh, I miss it so much! Sorry.
Okay, but I think the storytelling aspect of video games has undergone a very interesting evolution, because if you really think all the way back, the very first interactive stories that we actually had were mostly text-based adventures.
Yeah.
Which were actually just a written story that you could interact with in the most literal sense of the word. And later on, there's been many both successful and failed attempts to incorporate story into a video game world. So that's one example being The Legend of Zelda, which tries to establish this whole lore around it while you're actually not focusing on the story itself. Later, that turned into this whole cinematic experience, as we see with mostly PlayStation 3 titles, for example, but also on earlier consoles as well. And now we've gotten to this part where I think a lot of storytelling these days is done through the world that you actually explore in these video games. We've seen it recently, for example, with stories like Ghost of Tsushima or The Last of Us, both PlayStation examples in this case. But also with, interestingly enough, very indie and low-level titles. For example, one of my favorite examples being What Remains of Edith Finch, which basically tells a complete story of a whole family of the protagonist through the house they lived in. And that is very interesting and very intriguing to see how people could push this concept forward of telling a story without actually, writing out and acting out the story itself.
That's also an interesting example because, like we said, like you can meld together gameplay and the story itself. Because sometimes it's a bit too some games are too focused on story and then their gameplay is lackluster, and sometimes the gameplay is good but the story is just shit. For example, you said What Remains of Edith Finch, which has a good combination because there's such variety in gameplay, and the gameplay actually changes for every sequence, which gives it another way to glimpse into that family member's personality through the game that you basically play at that point. And one of my favorites...
It's basically a collection of short stories, in a way.
Yeah.
That basically melts together in one big experience. And it's very intriguing.
And I guess we touched on this last time, but yeah, that's not out there. So I'll repeat. It's like I think my favorite one has to be the one with the cannery, where he's just like the guy cutting the fishes the entire time, and then it gradually changes. So that's I think that's the best. That's the best done out of all of them. It's also one of the longest sequences, I think.
Somewhat, yeah, and definitely one of the oddest.
Yeah.
That suddenly turns into this whole fantasy story while you're still there doing manual labor in a way in this game. That also, it doesn't really show a story. It's not really a story that is relevant to the game you're playing. But in the way you're experiencing it, in this particular example, really shows that you can tell so much just through context and through the things you interact with, instead of just being told what is happening. For example, like many games do in cutscenes.
Yeah, it's part of the storytelling itself, and I think that's what blends the storytelling with the with the gaming portion of it itself, like the controls themselves and the world itself. Because I've heard, for example, one of the things that I heard, I think it was Jim Sterling that was complaining about the fact that some games take their realism too far. But to be honest about that one is, if we think about it, like some of the things that they have done to make the games more realistic are also things that tie the story and the gameplay together. For example, if you have all the animations that you have in the Last of Us 2 for just when you're upgrading weapons or stuff, they just, I mean, it tells a story in of itself. It's like these people have to basically take care of their guns themselves. They can't just go to a shop and like, my gun's busted, can you fix this? So they have to know how to fix them, how to upgrade that stuff. So, and it basically shows in like small animations of them doing some stuff, working on the guns, upgrading them, cleaning them, putting some oil like on the guns and that type of shit. Or for another example, like that's games that may be too realistic for people is in Red Dead Redemption 2, like all of those tedious things that come up.
Oh my god, flashbacks.
All of the little tedious things that you have to do just ties the game world and the story more together as well.
Rockstar. I don't want to individually pick up a can of baked beans in the house, okay?
But why not?
Collectively pick it all up and let's go.
But the question is why
not? Because I'm bored. And this is the question I was going to ask you guys. So like you're talking about story and you briefly touched on gameplay. Do you ever feel like sometimes gameplay is favored over a story? Like nowadays, I'm seeing that become more of a common trend. My only specific example is Assassin's Creed, just because like they rehauled it and now it's RPG and like it's got skill trees and stuff. Do you think gameplay? Because like of course gameplay is the one thing that breaches, that helps, that keeps you entertained, that keeps you like, oh, I want this cutscene to be over because I want to get on with it. But do you think like the gameplay sometimes and recently is really being favored over a good, decent, juicy story? Like, do you think that's happening? Because I think that's happening quite a lot, specifically.
But it still kind of depends, because the example that you give wasn't really the best, because skill trees and all those type of things basically are another type of storytelling, not a direct type of storytelling where you're like, this is the story of the game, but it is basically your integration into the story, like how do you want to play this character. A good example for that would be Outer Worlds, where you can choose how you build your character, how you play your character. That is gameplay, but that's also a layer of story, because it's who your character is in this world.
Well, yeah.
And that's that example. But there are other better examples. There are games that are purely made for gameplay as well. Like, Perry, that's also a story game. She's waving Dragon Age Inquisition at me, which is a game that has also story heavy. So I don't know why she's waving that at me. Fall Guys, Perry. That's gameplay, right? It's like like a lot of party games and those type of things.
Yeah. What was the game that you? No, it's not out yet. But the Blip Blop, like that mobile game, but it was a game that was played. So what was that game about?
I never played it actually.
That
Mosaic.
Not the Blip Blop, like the click and
Mosaic.
collect. That's it.
But Mosaic has very little gameplay, very very minuscule and very simplistic gameplay. So actually complete opposite of the spectrum. But one indie title I can actually think of that really ties into this is Sayonara Wild Hearts, which is basically just a rhythm game. The whole game is just focused on gameplay. There's nobody telling you, okay, this is the story, what's happening. There's like this cryptic text at the beginning. But there again, you experience a story through the levels, and you actually just go from level to level to level in a rhythm game. But you see this development of both the character you're playing, the people you're going up against in those levels, other characters, and the world itself, the tracks you're basically going through. And in the end, you actually start understanding a little bit what the inspiration was behind this, and why your character is acting and behaving in the world it is right now. So complete gameplay, but still enough room for interpretation and storytelling to be perceived by you. And I think that's the sweet spot if you want to go for gameplay. That's something it reminds me of. We all kind of hate this company, but we have to say the one thing that they kind of do right. We have to talk about Bethesda at that point as well, because when they make a world and they have those little things in there that tell their own stories, the world really lives. And at that point, you have that type of storytelling. Like, a lot of the times when it's Skyrim or Fallout 4, to be honest, who cares about the main overarching story in those games? A lot of the times it's all those small things that happen, right? A lot of that is more interesting. Yeah.
And that's the thing. The world tells its own story. That's why, if you look at something like Fallout 76, there was nothing there. So they just basically...
I mean, apart from it just never
how did they not
working
know
ever.
what they're like? The thing that I don't get there is, how did they not know what made their games work? Like they weren't well made. It was just
That was
it was just their
pure
world living. That's basically the thing.
Unfortunately.
So
Yeah, so Bethesda is a very interesting example of what you're speaking of, because Bethesda's games, like let's take Skyrim for an example, is very much, I would call it sandboxy. There is a story, there's an overarching plot, there's overarching elements, but in the end you are just a character in that world exploring and perceiving that story to yourself. And there's always this strange argument, what is better, Skyrim or the Elder Scrolls in general, or a game like The Witcher? And I was always thinking, why is that the case?
The Witcher.
No, this argument is when The Witcher was released, many people were comparing it to Skyrim, and that's a very strange comparison. Because while Skyrim is very sandboxy and lets you perceive it, basically, I don't want to say as an outside character, but definitely as the person dicking around in the
blank
world.
slate protagonist,
With
actually,
The Witcher,
that you fill in yourself.
yeah, exactly. And with The Witcher, you're an integral part of a written story that you are actively influencing.
Yeah, because like in Skyrim, you're just a mute. You're just a mute
Exactly.
thing. You just exist to kill people.
Yeah, and with Skyrim, you like create your own character. You give it its gender, race, backstory, whatever. While with The Witcher, you have this predefined character. It's very much two different ways of approaching storytelling in a way. And Skyrim is a really good example for telling a story through the
Do you
environment.
think that's ever gonna? Do you think some type of AI is ever gonna be smart enough to actually get to a point where they make games where you can have a blank slate protagonist that actually gets so involved in the game and everything you pick is so gonna be so important for the game itself that it actually just marries those two concepts that we were just talking about?
I think a No Man's Sky of storytelling would be an incredible step forward for storytelling and world building in video games. Absolutely, and I really hope we'll get to see that. And No Man's Sky on the concept phase, not on release date.
Well, it will be good after a few years then.
Maybe. But I do.
I was legitimately. Sorry, it's just legitimately the other day. I was driving, don't know where from, where to, but I had this weird PTSD where I just thought, oh, No Man's Sky on launch. I just had this, like, I stopped driving. I was like, what the
Weird
fuck?
flashback.
It's like, it was a full PTSD moment. I had to just remember everything. And I was like, okay, carry on.
Do you have that? Do you have that a lot? Because now I can see you just driving to like. I'm just gonna name a random store. You're just driving to Tesco, and all of a sudden it's like, Todd Howard, and you just stop.
No, it was.
Like you see country shoes or something, and it's like, oh god, leather jackets.
Oh, my God.
Bethesda conferences.
Seriously though, I've never had gaming PTSD as bad as No Man's Sky on launch, and it fully just stopped me driving. That's how bad it was.
Hey, Fable's
Fuck
back,
that guy.
right? Somebody's gonna have PTSD someday. But yeah, back to the topic. I think artificial intelligence and video game storytelling, or storytelling in general, actually is a very interesting and very novel concept. Like, we haven't really had the first AI written book, for example.
No.
We were still a few steps away from that, but I do think eventually a world that is revolving around the actions you take, be that artificial intelligence or not, could be a very interesting concept. For example, Dying Light 2 introduced the whole, the world changes around you depending on your decisions, and I think that's, while the game maybe wasn't the best game we've ever heard of, that was an interesting step in the right direction.
That's the same with you also had something similar to that with the, what was it, the first game in the Lord of the Rings where they had the two ones. Was it Shadow of Mordor? Was that the first one?
It was Shadow of Mordor.
Yeah,
and then
because the
Shadow
second
of
one
Mordor.
sucked balls. I know that one, but the first one introduced that Nemesis system, which also is something interesting to take to other game concepts.
Yes.
It's an interesting concept by itself, so that's already something. Like,
Wow, I haven't thought about that game in ages, but yeah, I remember. I was originally I watched someone play it, and then I went ahead and played it myself, and I remember thinking it was crazy because then you just make your own enemies. Like, you fully just made your own enemies if you didn't kill them. Like, they rose to the ranks. You're like, oh shit, that's my bad. I did that.
What could be very interesting is, for example, let's take role-playing games where you always have choices to make. Like, okay, do you want to approach a situation with a lot of diplomacy, or do you just want to rob their house? And depending on the actions you take, that's something artificial intelligence could understand,
But-
right? So later on, you're in a complete different part of the game, and people are actually, like NPCs are afraid of you robbing them because it's starting to perceive that as the notion you always take.
Yeah.
And the same could, for example, be applied to survival horror games or just horror games in general. Like Silent Hill games back in the day also tried, or not Silent Hill in the games, but what was that one game that like try to mess with your mind, like it's like deleting your save file or lowering the TV volume or whatever.
Oh.
And I feel something like that.
Wasn't that with the
What?
was
I
that with the
never heard
Doki
about
Doki
that.
Literature Club thing that did some of these weird
Yeah,
things?
well, that was a bit like there was a game for the PlayStation 2, I believe, that did that.
But there was also in
Like
PlayStation 1 there was also
I
there was
have
also
to
in
look that up.
in Metal Gear Solid there was that one boss fight. So that already kind of took it meta to some degree. So that's already PlayStation 1. So that's already a long time ago. So that's some of those concepts.
And it's very. The concepts were always there, really, but now I think we have the technology. For example, the PlayStation 5 will now actually adjust its audio settings depending to the things it reads from you as perceiving audio correctly. Now imagine you could measure human excitement in a game. Then you could actually adjust the game's content accordingly. That is, of course, way in the future, but something like that in, as I mentioned, role-playing games or horror games or general single-player experiences, I think that could be very.
So now I imagine.
See, it's
I was just gonna
No,
say.
go on, Brad,
Now
go
I
on.
imagine like Geralt of Rivia is just like having some fun with a prostitute, and your excitement level drops, and just a second prostitute comes in, and then your excitement level goes up again.
Well, you laugh about it, but that could be the thing. Now we're speaking very dystopic, but what if a player craves more sexual content in a video game? That could be something an AI realizes. Like, I don't know, take the costume away in Dragon Age. I have no
You're naked all of a sudden. Your clothes disappeared. The clothing gnome came and he took all your clothes. What you gonna do now?
But yeah, that's the,
what I was gonna say is, but it's weird because you guys speak about that, but think of Watch Dogs 3 that's coming out. There's no set player in that. You actually get to recruit whoever and however you want, and it's all AI generated.
There has to be a
about their
starting player,
background, who
though,
they
I guess.
influenced, what.
Well,
Well,
it has to be.
look, we don't. I personally don't know how you start the game, but
I have my own personal guess how it will start. There's
go on.
there-
No,
there's-
I'm interested because I haven't looked anything into it because I don't care.
I think the way it starts, and that's just my wild guess. Yeah, I know some people have already started playing it with Ubisoft, but the way it starts, there's this AI in the game. I think it was called. What was it called? Something Lee. I'm not sure. I'm thinking of Watson of IBM, but that's a real life AI.
Well,
No, well, there's this AI in the game, right? Just a character in the game, not an actual AI. I do believe what they're gonna do is like you take control of the AI at the very beginning, and you go through like a list of predefined people, and you see, okay, if I do this right now for this situation, I'll have this sort of pro and con to using this person first, and then the AI actually transmits a message to that player, and you eventually start taking control.
or you could even if you take the
I
AI.
really just hope you can play as Helen from the get-go.
You might be able to play as
Maybe.
Helen if you get particular.
But that's maybe even if you control the
Helen might not even
if you
turn up in
control
your
the
game.
the AI, you could even just potentially maybe even just go through a drone or something and fly around and then just pick random
Yeah.
people off of the street and
Exactly.
hack their phones and just do something or whatever to get them on board.
It could be that the first, you can basically acquisition people in the game to be playable characters. It could be that at the very beginning you're just an AI that can use technology, and the very first one you have to acquire is just through that means of technology, such as drones, surveillance cameras, etc.
But I feel like at like a lot of us just like we really want, like if you care about gaming, I think you want this game to succeed because of the fact that it brings something new that could lead to something else as well. Like people who want a game like that, like Watch Dogs 3 to fail, those are like potentially either people who just really, really hate Ubisoft and then okay, but this is bigger than Ubisoft at that point,
Can't blame them.
in my opinion.
I was gonna say
Uh,
they exist.
Or like people who don't really understand what this could do for what this could do for gaming in the future. So because this is something that hasn't been tried before, to that degree.
Yeah.
So that could lead to an
Though
entirely
Yeah.
you do see that pattern a lot of conservative versus futuristic, and I think it's no different in the gaming world. Just if people try something new, there's always gonna be skeptical people about it to see, and for some reason, some of them always want to go back to the status quo.
It's yeah. I mean, some people don't need more than just like, oh, I want to run around and shoot stuff. Like some people just have enough with that.
Then buy
Or
a Call of
there's a new
Duty.
Halo coming
Fuck
out, so
off.
I mean they could potentially get that. That just looks like running and gunning to me. Just a variety of guns.
And to be fair, I do think there will always be that market for the switch brain off and do something, well, exciting. I think there's always going to be the market for that, but if you start saying I'm not in favor of trying something new, then I think you're in trouble in any type of industry or any type of human interaction.
Yeah. Yeah.
But-
basically.
But that's one thing we touched about, like the story itself and how that could probably the evolution that we could see there is either that it becomes more cinematic and that we have more of a lead into that, and actually people who are in other sorts of media, like people who are in movies and that type of stuff, may give more credit to gaming at one point, and they may get more involved in that type of stuff, and that may be an evolution in of itself. And then we had, like we said, the chance of AI writing stories and basically taking into consideration what you're doing, and we don't, because now we have games, and there's a lot of games that have tried and succeeded with the here's your options, pick A, B, or C. We have those type of games. The next step there is, like we said, not having A, B, and C, just having your actions that become a type of like statistic, and the game use that statistic to do what would be best to work with that, and that in of itself is the next step. And then you went a step further than that with the game also trying to figure out what your current feelings are and how to play with those. I feel like that's a step beyond that, because a step beyond that would be like fully like just like you're getting into the like something similar to the Matrix, like getting your consciousness into a game and then just being in like some type of stasis spot for like a while. I think that would be the next step beyond that. So, I mean, I feel like we have a lot of steps there.
God, I hope I'm still alive by then.
Yeah, we probably won't be alive by then. Unless we are in those spots.
I hope so.
Who
I really
knows?
hope.
Unless we can upload our consciousness ourselves, maybe. Still, just like last thing. Just as you're about to die.
Don't give me any ideas.
I feel like you're really fueling a
No.
fire. You're creating a villain within Weird right now. Not that anyone hasn't done that before, but
If the story got a hero, then I'm guessing I'm the villain, right?
I mean, the story needs a villain, right? So,
yeah.
or at least
I need a cat I can stroke while turning around. I've expected.
I have
to.
one.
that's a dog
I
grip.
don't want your cat now.
That's a dog grip.
Good. He's mine.
It's a dog. It's a dog.
I'll
No,
take the
no,
dog.
that's a dog. The cat.
I know you have a cat. It was just
I'll
a
take
bad,
the dog.
just a bad joke. Just a bad joke. Let's get back on track, because we talked about the story itself. Another thing is we also talked about how story and gameplay could blend together. Gameplay itself, like there has been mainly in what we saw is gameplay getting smoother and just being and having the option to do more things, have basically more animations preloaded that you can do, which still at this point, that's the point where we are, right? We have more animations and the games feel freer because you have more control over smaller individual parts of animations. But at this point, we're still watching animations that happen when you press a button. It's not like you have like full control over the game character itself. I feel like maybe that's something that would still evolve. Like we're gonna have more and more control. They're gonna probably.
But how much more control do you want? Because at that level, you're just talking about
That's at
being
that
in
point
VR.
we're gonna be talking about like full VR
Might
and
be.
well, that's beyond VR actually, because we have VR now and that's still fairly similar.
Yeah, but you saying like you wanting to do the particular things with that character or whatever. I mean, at some level, you're just gonna start talking about it being you and then you being in the game. Like that's what.
That's
it
at one
felt
point,
like.
but then
Oh, that's a really interesting topic, though. as soon as you are so immersed in a video game that you actually are basically a character in that game, regarding interaction and presence in that world, then you create this kind of, and now get ready for a big term, ludonarrative dissonance, which basically which basically means you're, while increasing your interactivity with a virtual world, you're decreasing your relevance in it. Because, for example, let's say you have a character in a video game, the main character, but you are so fully in control of him that the control that you give over this character is actually completely unrelated to what that character would be doing normally regarding the story you want to tell in the world you're in.
Yeah, but then there's a step beyond. There's a combination of those things as well, because at that point you're controlling the character. The character is probably at that point limited by your own physical limitations, but there has to be a point where there's also a marriage of that, where you can basically are in a game and you can control the game, but it's beyond your own physical limitations. You, for example, you can actually fly, you can jump, you can put your, if you're flexible, like you can put your feet behind your back. Even if you're like a fat, obese person with like, they can't move their legs in the game, you can put like your leg behind your head.
I mean, Bram, okay,
Hey.
speak for yourself, but Jesus, some of us are not that bendy.
I can almost.
Oh my god, he actually attempted it. I want everyone to know he actually attempted it.
I always wondered, do morbidly obese people playing video games complain when a character doesn't move fast enough?
Yes.
It's just ludonarrative dissonance.
Again.
Every time I have a stamina bar in a video game and they run out of breath, I call them a fat fuck. I'm like, you're a video game character. Why the fuck have you got stamina? Run faster!
Lol.
While you're not moving an inch.
And then there's people complaining about the fact that you can run in Halo now, and you're talking about stamina.
Wait. Could you never
And
run
then, well,
in
in the
Halo?
beginning you couldn't run in that game. No, you couldn't sprint.
Really?
Okay, never mind. There's a lot of people who still have a problem with that.
Oh, Oh, they're sweaty and they're in a basement and no one fucking cares.
Wow.
Jesus. Sweaty life's matter.
Negativity.
I mean, I would be. It's
I'm sweaty
it's
right now.
warm today. I would be less sweaty if I were in a basement, I guess. To be honest, at this point.
No, I know. If you're in a basement, I'll never. I lived in a basement for a couple of weeks, a couple of years ago. Never, don't ask. And I wore jumpers to bed at night, but it would be like 42 degrees outside. It was so hot, but it was so cold in the basement. So actually, yeah, being in a basement's probably.
Were
a bit
you
smart.
allowed outside of the basement?
No.
What did you do, Weird? You know, why did you ask that?
Sorry,
You're not gonna.
I forgot the key.
I
forgot he was still down there.
He was like, just leave him. You know, he'll be
Damn.
fine. And there was luckily just a drain pipe that Weird would just like throw a baguette in, and it would just deposit somewhere in the room.
He was just sucking on the heater for nourishment, really.
So yeah, like we said at that point, we have all seen to some degree an evolution in those type of like peripherals, like VR. VR is one of the latest installments to say, like the PlayStation VR and Oculus Rift and those things. There's basically the latest peripheral. I think in the beginning they tried that a long time ago with like the Virtual Boy type thing, where you just had like the red and black. It was just like, what are you gonna see this?
Whenever I think of VR, I think of the Virtual Boy. I don't think of modern HTCs and PSVRs. I literally think of the Virtual Boy.
I mean,
That's
if you
what I
have to
think
go
of.
back to where they started trying to do something like that, I don't think you can go far in front of that, like ahead of that. I think there wasn't much before that.
Though, to be fair, we talked about conservative and futuristic opinions, right? You could the concept that were applied in the Virtual Boy are essentially the same as they are in modern day virtual reality headsets. Stereoscopic image viewing, LCD screen that is being projected through lenses. You can see the concepts there, and I think failure is a necessary step to evolution.
Mm-hmm.
If the Virtual Boy didn't sell or didn't perform well, that is actually a good thing, because now we have some headsets that do.
Yeah, no, that's a good point.
I mean,
Yeah. The thing about VR is, it's we've had this discussion before. We've all talked about VR to death, but the thing about VR is it's weird how it's really hard to take off. Like, you've got fun games in it, but VR is still yet to find good footing in the gaming world. Like, it's not like I can't think of anything that's like a gimmick that's really big in
But that's the thing with gimmicks. Gimmicks aren't really things that are long lasting a lot of the time.
No, I know, and VR is not a gimmick because it's got, like, outside of gaming, it's got great practical uses.
It is one of the first peripherals that's not really a gimmick, to be honest. Yeah, because what you have before that, you had like the iToy on the PlayStation 2 was one of those things where they tried to bring you into the game, but it was like entirely different way of working.
For context,
I have an iToy in this room. He said iToy, and I was like, oh my god, where is it? Somewhere in the room. I don't know where it is.
Kinect, and then you had the PlayStation Move on the PlayStation. Those type of things, which the Move is still part of the of your VR experience, actually. So that's one thing.
Yeah.
I wonder what they're gonna do with that with the PlayStation 5. Are they still gonna keep the same headsets? Are we gonna?
Well, that's a.
We're gonna have to invest in new headsets.
What do you guys say?
A lot of the tech that is currently being sold as part of end products, your HTC Vives, your PlayStation VRs, they are playing it very safe. PlayStation Move, for example, the Move controllers, they have been out since the PlayStation.
Yeah.
Jesus, I can talk. PlayStation 3. And that's because they are well tested, and that's because they also have the means to produce them rather quickly and then sell them for an excruciating price. Oh, that's besides the point. The thing is, there's also a lot of interesting tech in VR that is just not ready for the consumer market yet. For example, I studied VR for half a year. And, for example, motion capture in VR.
We remember.
Motion capture systems have been in place for movies and video games for quite a while now. And making these accessible to an end customer would mean one-to-one translation of body parts or complete bodies to video games. That is not feasible yet, but definitely one of the steps that will be explored in the next few years.
And I mean, talk about sweating now when you put your VR headset on with that leathery, mushy thing in front of your face. It's like almost like a squeegee that's being put to your face, and when you remove it, it's like, and then a waterfall comes and just drips on the floor, and then you have to drain.
VR has given me some of the worst hairline acne I've ever had in my life. The reason I majority don't play VR is because it just gives me horrendous, painful acne. I'm like, no, I can't deal with it.
And also because it's quite a pain in the ass to set up. The PlayStation VR is one of the easiest VR headsets to set up, and I still don't set it up because, No,
me neither.
Because it's still a hassle. There's still this barrier to entry. For many people, and then even so for some, movement is a barrier to entry. Some people don't want to move or can't move because of disabilities, and until you find a way to pass these barriers, whatever they may be they movement, be they perception, be they whatever, you're gonna have a hard time evolving in that type of virtual reality.
And that's
you say that, but then we look at the Oculus Quest, which is a headset that you just put on your face. You have two controllers, and all it does is like, I mean, again, you might not be able to, but it's just like draw a line around where you can't touch the room, and we'll just remember it, and then we'll tell you off when you get close to it.
Yeah.
Like, that is a headset.
Yeah.
Unlike the HTC Vive, which doesn't take 3 fucking years to set up, because you boot it up, you press a button. I've not been on one, but I presume you press a button, and it's like, hello, welcome to the virtual world. What would you like?
Also,
to do?
most headsets.
So we're actually already at that level where it's so accessible in that sense, because it doesn't require this fucking kerfuffle that previous generations of
Also, the PlayStation still suffers from a issue that has been around since the Kinect and the Move controllers on that generation. The fact that whatever's behind you doesn't exist, as you're basically an obstruction for your own movement. You're like, oh, I want to do something behind me.
And that really takes you out of the world that you're trying to
and
do.
that really is one of the contributing factors to people getting nauseous as well. Because it basically requires you to do a full 180 in the game without spinning around yourself.
Yeah, because you have to do the foot, like the quick jolt turning, and you're like, oh god, this really takes me out. But like, unless you by the way, we're all talking about PSVR because these are the headsets that we're
not rich.
But my best mate, I brought her a Vive for her birthday, and there's a long cable, but it's so massively strange turning round and not having to press a billion buttons to then just do
Vive-
the actual turning round.
Technology-wise, the Vive, technology-wise, the Vive is actually, it's pretty good. And
It's great.
And if you got the right software for it, then it's working incredibly well. The problem is you need the space, and you need the tech, and you need the means to set it up.
And money. By the way, you've got to
you need
already
to
buy a very, very powerful computer, and then you've got to buy a very, very expensive headset. When I was talking about it with Becky, one of her sensor boxes. Do you want to know how much that is each?
Yeah, I know.
It's like £500 for a sensor box. If one of them goes, she has to pay 500 quid for another one.
To be fair, the technology built into these sensor boxes is actually very sophisticated. I took one of those support ones, and it is very good.
It's £500 for a reason. Yeah,
Well,
it's £500
not-
for a reason.
not
being
just
said,
that,
it's £500. Not a lot of people have a spare 500 after spending almost 3,000 quid.
We also have to be
on this
have to
crap.
be honest. For a lot of gamers, we said like VR as a concept is bigger than gaming itself. But in gaming, it's just a small slice of what makes up the entirety of gaming. And there's when you have those things like those peripherals and all that stuff, and you know what your market share is gonna be. You can only produce what you're gonna sell, because otherwise you're overproducing at that point. I think if something like a HTC Vive would be like, if everyone would buy one, those things wouldn't be $500 anymore. Like, because then they could produce them on a bigger scale, and at that point they would be produced. Would be able to produce more of them per minute, and then that would basically reduce the price as well. Because it all comes down to, first they have to make back all the money that they spent on research and development, and the creation, and the cost of the creation, and setting up the production line, and then the production of the thing itself. And at the end, when you have done all of that, basically the profit that you're making is just the profit off of the fact that, this costs so much to produce, and this is how many we can make, so that's the profit that it does not help that VR isn't super popular. Otherwise it would definitely be cheaper as well, and that would make it's sort of vicious cycle, actually, to be honest, right?
Yeah, that's the big conundrum, really, of VR. You have this tech that you first need to see if it actually works for the things you want to produce for it, or even see what you can produce for it. The whole keeping it safe part. But by playing it safe, you will always only speak to either the tech enthusiasts or the people that can afford it without having to risk anything of their personal equity. But
But hold on, flip side. Before that, again, I speak about the Oculus Quest, but again, I don't have one. I've never touched one, but it's only that, a HTC Vive, again, we're talking either cord or cordless, is still well over £1,000. But the Quest is there, again, it's all free, full of free of cables. Downside, you can only get up to 64 gigabytes of memory on the actual headset, so that's your limitation. Like, you could, on your PC, you can have thousands of games, but the limitation is, because I don't know with the Quest, I don't know if like 64 gigabytes means that that's also some of its running power, like some of its software like takes away from that already, because it's like the Switch, you can only have, I don't know what the base Switch memory is, but it is not a lot. Like, you could just fit Breath of the Wild on a base Switch, and you cannot download another game.
Yeah.
So yeah, like, there are the limitations already in other places which are providing better experiences and cheaper, because the Quest, I want to say a Quest is like maybe £500, £600. Like, it's way cheaper, and it's a nicer thing, but you've got the limitations in those spaces. But anyway, sorry, Wood, I did interrupt you.
Actually, I kind of want to go back to the point you just said. There is always going to be technical limitations. That's something that you have when you try to innovate. But the thing is, I do believe, aside from gaming itself, we are in a point of technical renaissance. I think the innovations and evolution in technology, both entertainment-wise and otherwise, is going to shoot into the night sky anytime soon. We are gonna see so many innovations if humanity doesn't fuck itself beforehand, and that will also influence the way we perceive entertainment media. Actually, not even entertainment media, just media in general. And I think as soon as you can get rid of these, child diseases, as we would say in German.
Oh, I thought you were just talking about Corona in general.
No.
I was like, oh, fair play.
No, in German you actually say Kinderkrankheiten, like children's disease, something you get at the beginning of trying to make something.
Yeah,
As soon as you can get rid of those, I think you can really start to innovate and really start to make something that is completely new and completely novel to anything we've ever seen.
I mean, we have a similar word in Dutch, but I don't know if it's. I really don't know what the English literally would be for, like, us starting hiccups, basically, when you make something new.
Yeah.
Don't look at the person whose native language is English, because
But-
he's dyslexic and
You-
can't spell for
but-
fuck.
but we're-
So.
Actually, that's a good question. How is text for you in virtual reality?
For me?
Yeah.
I mean, fine, I can read.
Can.
Wow. Yeah.
I can read weird. I do actually have a very good mind to read. I'm confused by the question. Is it like because it's there? Like it's so close to me? Do you think like is it confusing to me because it's just awkwardly spaced in a virtual world? Is that what you mean?
I was actually just thinking, because perception in virtual reality is very different from a 2D space you're watching with a monitor or a display. And so I was wondering how people actually perceive that. For example, I used to play a terrible VR game that was sent to me, and I couldn't read any single letter because it was just so awkwardly spaced and so small, because people were still in the mindset of creating a game first and then porting it to virtual reality. But then there's something like, for example, Superhot, lovely VR game, where everything is so clear because it's made for VR. Like, I think there's a whole new part of research into human perception, and it still has to be done before you can actually start.
What's interesting for that as well is, I don't know if, I think Griff also played Resident Evil 7 in VR.
Yes,
I have one problem with it. It was the one game that made me nauseous after a while, because the textures are really they're more, in a lot of VR games are really simple, the textures, and plain, and they don't do too much. But in Resident Evil 7 you had like those shapes, and they were covered in like some type of like almost photo textures, which were like high quality renders and stuff, but they were also like very unclear to some degree, and I feel like there was a certain type of disfocus which made me nauseous after a while.
See, I can't think of that example, but my biggest problem is resolution and anti-aliasing in VR games, specifically PlayStation VR. Like HTC Vive is very good. Yeah. It is the technical limitation. Like that doesn't make me feel nauseous. I've actually got good legs for VR. Like I really can sit in VR for a very long time and be completely fine. If anything, I just get exhausted.
Yeah, for me it was also just Resident Evil
like,
7 because of its like more complex textures.
But I fully did have a problem with Resident Evil 7, but the thing that takes me out of a virtual world is just, like we'd say, the technical limitations. Like the best, I'm trying to think, what was the best looking PSVR game I've ever played? I'm really trying to remember. There is one, and I fully forgot everything.
I mean, it always looks worse as a compared to non-VR games.
I mean, I always...
For me.
What was it for you?
For me,
because it might be the same for me.
For me, it was definitely Accounting Plus, which is a weird as hell game. But the point is, it's made for VR. The whole concept of how you interact and perceive the world is just straight up from the ground made for this platform. And it has a very cartoony and very contrast-rich art style. So that is basically all putting it together for perception on such a novel media. But let's say you would put something like a modern day Call of Duty on VR right now. I feel like that would go down terrible.
The game isn't... you know what would work in VR? And then we would have to take steps back gameplay-wise. You know, like those old school arcade shooters where you just basically on-rail shooters? That works in VR. The biggest problem in VR still is movement, actually.
Yeah, there was a horror game for that.
Yeah, that one. There was one, I remember that. But the thing is, an actual shooter, for example, let me take something like... let me just take Apex for a second, because there's a lot of running and sliding and crawling and that type of stuff. The game is so fast-paced no way you can port something like that to VR with the current limitations that we have to movement.
Yeah. It would be an interesting way of, I'm not sure if that's an English word, fire baptism. Basically a very first big trial into the next step. Does anybody remember Mirror's Edge? A very contrast-rich game about parkour and combat. Now, of course, if you just put the old Mirror's Edge on an HTC Vive right now, you'll get motion sickness for days. You'll feel like you'll be on the Titanic as the Titanic is ramming the iceberg for the second. But if you were to be able to make a game like Mirror's Edge on a modern-day HTC headset, let's say, without introducing much motion sickness, because you're able to get the interactivity right, then you'll be set to create more enriching experiences, even with such things as modern-day shooters such as Apex. As soon as you, of course, unless you, if you get the art style right to make it perceivable well enough in virtual reality.
Yeah, but a lot of those games, like, I'm not like, there's a big contrast in games as well now, because there's the online playability as well. So some games are scaled down graphic wise to begin with, and are made like a bit more cartoony and with like shell shading and that type of shit, to basically look less less realistic, but have their own style, and basically have something that doesn't really impact the servers all too much, I would say. I feel like that's what's behind a lot of the stuff, like even the ugly style that's basically obnoxiousness personified for Fortnite. The fucking ugly vomit-inducing cartoony style, which looks like somebody over at Blizzard got drunk one day and just quit the
Blizzard. Why are you attacking
because
Blizzard?
Because Blizzard.
I mean, Blizzard is no. Blizzard is the art style that a lot of games want to try and copy, like their cartoony style.
You guys are talking about Overwatch.
Doing it ugly. Well,
Overwatch
has a similar style, but that's properly done. I feel like a Fortnite is like, oh, they do that cartoony thing in Overwatch, we're gonna do it, but then they make it ugly and obnoxious and with like colors that clash and that type of shit, and you're like, okay, this is hideous.
There's another interesting point hiding here. It's creative vision and actually, creative entrepreneurship in combat to marketability. Something like Fortnite is easily marketable. You see Fortnite everywhere, or I think you used to see it. I'm not sure how the market.
I don't think it's lost. It hasn't waned much in popularity, I think.
No,
unfortunately, it didn't, and that's because it's something that everybody can easily relate to. How many kids do you think play Fortnite these days? So absolutely many.
I don't know children.
But
I don't
statistically, and it's almost kind of sad because you're giving more power to something that is less creativity put into it. But unfortunately, that's how the market dictates.
But that's how the market works in a lot of stuff. Like it's I know. It almost ties back to the podcast that I did with Griffith, like the entertainment and art type of stuff. Like, it's a lot of easy to digest entertainment is obvious all the times more popular. Like, poppy music is more popular than anything that's complicated in like music theory or something, for example, or movies that are that require more thinking. They're less accessible, so it's gonna be similar with video games. It's all sorts of entertainment. I mean, 50 Shades of Grey was a book that was written very shittily, and that was a thing that was popular. It's like just basically someone who doesn't really know how to write a book wrote a book, and that was one of the most popular books at one point. Okay, that happened.
I gotta say though, the 50 Shades of Grey
is based on a book. It's a book based on a book. 50 Shades of Grey is based on fanfiction.
There's also a movie called Secretary. Watch that. It's basically the blueprint from 50 Shades of Grey, but from the 80s. But and then there's 365 Days, which is, I think a good friend of us, Nicole, once tweeted that 365 Days is 50 Shades of Grey without consent. But we're getting a bit off topic here. What did I want to say? I started rambling.
Well,
goddamn.
It's there's gonna be some rambling.
Let's move on from
this
that.
This is not a non-rambling podcast. I mean,
That's a total.
Oh, I can go off on 50
Yeah,
Shades of Grey all day, but
not
you're
what we're here to do now.
No.
And we already had this. We already had the story section about story and gameplay, so it's not even that relevant anymore at this point.
Oh, imagine a 50 Shades of Grey video game. You want a movie tie-in game?
Another thing I was gonna something that we I was gonna touch on
I
something
have
that we
nothing to say.
didn't really talk about last time we tried this. Do you think there's gonna be a change in how video games and basically morality go like hand in hand? How you have like nowadays, you still have that whole thing. Like in the 80s, they started with like when you have video games, there were people who were like opposed to them. Despite so many studies showing that video games actually do the opposite, where they basically can calm people down who may be over-aggressive to some degree, there's still people who basically complain about, this video games basically tie into people shooting other people and that type of shit. And then we also have the entire thing about, like, if you look into video games, how many video games are there that are actually about having sex, for example, which is a thing that a lot of people do, but there's still this stigma in, like, movies and everything that basically keeps it from being something that's worked on, because it's not, there doesn't seem to be a market for it, despite the internet being mostly made up out of porn and that type of stuff. But that's two things, like violence and you can have that. You have that in movies as well. Like a lot of people like think violence is all fine, but when there's a boob, that's an issue. In most, I guess in Europe it's not too much of a problem. It's more, I guess it's more outside of Europe. But do you think?
Yeah, just to let non-Europeans know,
most
we
of the
just
time.
walk
I
around
do,
without
no.
boobies out all the time.
Yeah.
Just
I
saying
let them out every single
So, what I was mainly
Yeah, I flashed strangers on the street.
to keep a long story short, basically, I was gonna say, do you think that video games are gonna suffer from the stigma of being supposedly for children much longer, or do you see like there's gonna be a bigger evolution in that and moving away from?
There is no way video games are for children. Not with the video games they produce nowadays.
I mean, but
With
wouldn't you
a
agree that
level of
there's still
violence or
among?
whatever? Like, I'm not gonna lie. If a child played The Last of Us Part 2, I'd be very concerned for that child's future.
I mean, I would play
Some
it.
of the stuff
I
that
would play it
happens in
under
that game, I was
11
like,
years
"Ugh,
old, but
too much.
I would let my 11 years old play that.
I wouldn't touch it.
I would let my kid play that.
Well,
This is when Weird's like,
11 years old is when I started
I'll
watching
play
porn,
this
so
yeah, no,
I
my
mean-
parents didn't allow me if you didn't remember.
I think I've seen most stuff by then.
But I think the concept of morality in video games is already rapidly changing, and one of the biggest contributing factors to that is money. Because right now we are in this stage where we see, hey, this is a really big industry. I mean, the video games industry is already bigger than, I think it was movie industry, music industry, and something else combined. There's so much money in this that people are starting to say, okay, this is not something we have to object, this is something we have to control in a way. And in many ways, that can work. For example, we had the whole ESRB after Mortal Kombat was initially released. And that actually had an impact on the market, and actually a positive impact, even though there has been misuse afterwards. I think there's always going to be that whole problem of moral panics in media. We have that everywhere. For example, does anybody remember the hot coffee controversy?
Oh yeah, I do remember that.
no.
GTA.
Well, basically,
San
hot
Andreas.
coffee was a mod for GTA that allowed to have not even semi-realistic
Just horrible
sex scenes.
polygon shit.
But people were losing their shit. They were lost.
Was that? Are we talking about?
But
San
that wasn't
Andreas?
I do
even.
believe it was San Andreas. Yeah.
Yeah. No. Okay. No, I do.
But
no, now I do. I
I've
just
always
didn't
heard
know
that
it
that
had a
wasn't
title
a mod,
called
that that was basically something that was in the game, and that there was a mod to make it accessible.
Yeah.
That-
That later stirred the soup as well, but the initial moral panic was just about that being introduced to a game, or that being introduced to people in general. The thing is, people were complaining loudly, and that was covered by the media and everything. But eventually, Rockstar lost a lawsuit and actually opened up a fund for people to retrieve something out of it in case they were affected by hard coffee. That has been taken for about 2% of the complete fund. People who didn't care after the initial controversy. It was only about controversy, not about the point behind it. And I think it's very important to discern between something that can actually affect humanity, let's say, for example, also evolution of children, something like that, versus something people just want to complain about. And I think we can see a new example of this with The Last of Us 2. With the character of Abby, which really split the gaming community.
You know what confused me about Abby as well? There are people complaining about it. I've actually seen more muscular women than Abby. I've actually seen people that were like more muscular. I have to some people's what would I say, to give them something. I have seen women who had like bigger muscles but also bigger boobs. So I mean, it not necessarily means that you're gonna lose your boobs if you work out hard. Whatever. There's something for everyone there, I guess. Whatever.
I lost mine.
But then again, I watch some wrestling every now and then, so maybe that's why. But but then again,
don't even get me started on the Abby thing.
It's an interesting.
By the way, fully in
But the
defense.
thing is,
like, I don't know why people are making a big deal about it.
It isn't. Well, I think there is a discussion to be had about, and I think that's generally true from media, about representation of let's say, with Abby, for example, a lot of people claimed her to be transgender, which I don't think.
No, but she's also not even. She's not transgender.
Because she's not.
Yeah, exactly. But people made it a point, and it actually started coming arguments from two sides, and. People are actually. I've seen a lot of comments about people complaining. Oh, they introduce transgender people.
Yeah,
to
but
my
that's
games.
not about Abby.
And
okay.
Yeah, I know. But this point has been made a lot, and I do think there is a point to not pointlessly introduce specific types of characters for the sake of having such a character. But I do think representation in games is important. For example, Don Nerd is now releasing a game called Tell Me Why, which is specifically about two, I think at the beginning it's sisters, one of them becoming transgender. And there it's very much about the issues of a transgender person, very much the type of representation, which is not something you have when you just, for example, I know it's a meme at this point, but hey, let's introduce another gay character to a Netflix scene because they're gay, not because
But then again, I don't think there's too much to complain about with The Last of Us 2 when it comes in regards to that, because the actual transgender trans boy is actually one of the best characters in the game. One of my favorite characters.
Yeah.
And that's how it should be. That's really
spoilers,
how it
by the way, spoilers.
So it's not like it's representation for the. It actually also the story works. So I don't know. There's no complaints. Like that character's story works. So there's nothing to complain about. It doesn't feel like ham-fisted, like somebody forced.
For me, it's not hand-fisted because I don't know how to phrase this. But the reason, because I'm trying to phrase it without spoiling it, but I'm not gonna lie, spoilers, because I can't be arsed. Just with the character, because of what happened and who he is, it had an effect that just needed the story or the reason his story happened. It wasn't like, oh, I'm this thing, so now this thing can happen. It's not because they had to be that thing. They were that thing,
well, actually, it's not like the character was like, hey, let's introduce a trans character. No, it was like this character was trans, and the story basically also flows further from that. It's not like the character was forced into a story. Like, we made a story, and then we. Yeah, that's basically what it comes down to.
I fully couldn't think
so it's all fine in that department. But that's, I mean, that is definitely something.
But also, if you've got a problem with it,
I mean,
you're a problem.
We're gonna see more of that. I mean, you're gonna see games that are specifically aimed at black people, for example. I think you're gonna see that, like a game that's like aimed at like white people to basically show you like, hey, this is how. This is like somebody who's black who maybe wants to basically show what their experience in life was. Maybe they'll make a video game aimed more at like white people to be like, hey, check this. This is maybe some insight that you may need. Like, I think we're gonna see more of that. Like, we're gonna see more games that are actually based on expanding people's morals and people's insights into situations and expand their... basically, what we're going to see is people who are now being... retracting from reality to some degree, which we see in some gamers. They're basically like, they use it as an escapism. They're like, okay, I've had enough of what happens outside world, I'm going to go into video gaming. But the outside world is going to start seeping more and more into video games as well, because we're going to have those, because obviously stories are also based on the real world. So, I mean, if the real world progressively embraces trans people more and finally also just start acting less racist and all that type of shit, that's going to affect on like people's views, and that in turn is going to impact video games, because video games exist in reality. They're not something that just exists in a vacuum. So
I think the idea of creating video games to show specific viewpoints in the society we live in is a very interesting concept that should be introduced more, because these types of experiences will introduce controversy, but in this case it will be introducing controversy for good, because then you're actually considering concepts that are affected in the real world, instead of, oh no, this character might be transgender, oh no, this character looks like a man even though it's supposed to be a woman or something. Because it all goes really back to the idea of stupid people discuss people, and intelligent people discuss ideas. And that's, I think, something that should be introduced to media a lot more, be that video games
that's
or
like I said, one side of the moral argument as well. Like, we have people who basically want to keep their games apolitical, which I mean a game's about war is definitely not political. I mean, when has war ever been political? I mean,
No.
what are they talking about, really? Like,
We're just a bunch of...
That was the Division that said.
yeah, I think, yeah,
Ubisoft.
yeah.
Yeah, the game about right-wing put a militia is definitely...
Yeah, the
not
game that's
political,
basically like
especially in the US.
propaganda for why you should own a gun. That's not a political game. Yeah, I mean, that's...
Well, I wouldn't say that the game is
Well,
propaganda.
it's
but it
not.
very
I
much
don't
goes
think
in
it's
that
actually
direction,
like
yeah.
supposed to be propaganda, but I mean, it's.
Yeah, but claiming it's apolitical.
I mean, nothing
doesn't
is
make
actually.
any sense. And it
The thing
really
apolitical
shouldn't
also
make
doesn't
sense.
exist, because it's up to people to interpret how they take it, and everything has some effect or is somehow affected by politics. So there's just no such thing as apolitical, to be honest. There's maybe politically ignorant. That's a thing.
Well, there is the claim that art doesn't necessarily have to be political. For example, if I were to take a bit of duct tape and a banana and tape that to a wall, I wouldn't really make any political statement with it. But the point is, I'm still doing it for some reason. And I think if you consider politics to be the existence and difference of different opinions, then there's always some sort of conflict, some sort of interaction between human beings that you can always extract from any piece of art.
That's
including
definitely
video
it.
games.
And then the same thing, because we touched on the more the fact of the serious bit of like imbalance. And if you look at the internet, which is 90% porn, and then you look at video games where there's hardly anything sexual, to be honest, there's still a big imbalance there, right? Which, I mean, do you think that's mainly also part of the fact that video games for the longest time have been viewed as something for kids or people who shouldn't be watching porn or something like that? Do you think that has anything to do with that as well?
What, that video games...
No.
are
I was
set for
just
a
talking about
certain age group.
the lack of like pornography and that type of stuff in the interactive medium to begin with.
There is an interesting contrast, because the two things that people tend to keep away from children the most are sexual content and violence. And we have a whole lot of representation of violence in video games. So there's this interesting contrast as to why that is not the case. Or why that is being marketed more, in case there is actually something that we are all
Yeah, but
aware of.
I think that's also similar with... But we do the same thing with movies, right? I think a lot of kids just see like action movies and horror movies where people get ripped up and that type of shit. And they don't get to see the thing. I mean, I'm not gonna lie. I started watching porn when I was 11 or something. So I mean, it's not like I ever had that an issue with that shit. Obviously, you can't let your parents know that when you're just watching.
I wasn't ready for that level of sharing.
This is an honest
on a
podcast, people.
but okay. Wow. What a.
But to be fair, Ram is touching on an interesting point that the existence, hiding the existence of porn doesn't make it go away. And he's right. If he starts watching porn with 11, there's plenty of kids that watch porn. Let's be fair. The thing is, it's not something that's being openly talked about. And it's also not something
which
that's
is probably also going to come back. I was going to do a podcast about education once. So I was planning on doing a podcast on education at one point, and I think that's going to come back up about the fact that there's a bit of a laziness in that. Like, it's to me, it's like, I think at like when somebody's at that age, they should probably be told that exists and that it's not a realistic representation of the sex itself. Basically, it's like, this is fantasy, like, movies. Yeah. And this is, and then you have the actual thing, which is more like that.
Yeah, and it's the same thing with violence again, right? Nobody, as you mentioned, Griff played violent video games when he was 13 years old. You didn't expect that would be, the world of the grown-ups. Absolutely not. And it's an interesting concept of how people adapt to that, and I think that's a whole part of human behavior that has not been researched.
It's interesting how that distinction really exists, because that's true, because you're not going to be like, oh, video games, you just run around, you shoot people, oh, that's how life is going to be. Like, nobody makes that assumption, and then they don't do the same thing. They don't do the same thing with sexual content, which is weird. Like, they don't make it like, hey, look, this is fake, because like. I mean, even with watching porn so early, I did realize that you're not supposed to just fuck someone up the ass and not come in their face. I mean, that's not how it works most of the time. So, I mean, I realized that. So, and we do realize those things when we play video games, like that shooting and punching people and just solving all your problems with violence aren't.
It's just he said shooting again, and I was like, what's he going to say
Shooting
next?
a string of jizz?
What is the word he's going to describe?
Well, shooting someone in the face. It applies to both. Continue.
And in both cases, don't swallow, please.
Jesus.
I mean...
But the point is, there might actually be a distinction between violence and sexual content in media perceived by everyone, really. The point is, there's never been this type of exposure.
Yeah, it's not researchable now at this moment. That's the biggest problem. Like, we don't know if it's actually. I mean, I can say that it's safe. I mean, I could say that for me it was that is like similar. I could make the distinction in both ways, that it's all fantasy basically without anyone having to tell me. But we don't have that. We don't have like somebody saying, okay, look here, this is pornography. This is fake, and it's basically fantasy. This is not fully how it goes. It's comparable to how in a movie you don't go to the police when somebody kills your dog, but you go and shoot everyone. And then when they kill your second dog, you do the same thing over again. So, that type of shit.
And as far as gaming and interactive media goes, I do believe we'll see a rise of sexual content.
At this point, we see that mainly through mods, right? Because, for example, both Fallout and Skyrim, I know that those have like porn mods and that type of shit. I know The Sims, it's very popular. I think Griff also said in the gay community that it's very popular for people. Ooh. You told me this once, that you saw somewhere. Yes!
Did I? Fully
you
don't
said
remember
something.
It. Oh wait, no. Actually, he does tell like I did say, and I think I can almost quote. A lot of my gay friends have a lot of rude or like nudity mods installed. I mean, I don't. I just like to play base Sims. What's fucking wrong with just playing The Sims? Why have I got to see someone's dick?
There's less woohoo.
I mean, but yeah, people probably installed some more variety in their woohoo animations and some less pixelated stuff.
That was the shittest joke I've ever made in my life. Oh.
but I've also tried to look stuff up like that to see like how is it actually, and you don't really find that much. I feel like apart from the Japanese who go overboard and make like full on like rape games for some reason, it's like you can't just have like a sex simulator. It's like let's go there. Let's just skip that and go too far again. I mean it's eventually it's a video game, so that's still something. But apart from that, like you don't see much in that type of content. I saw that there were some games that were in development that I could see, but they were all like small scale stuff that haven't gotten that far yet. So I don't know how the future's gonna be there.
See, I think I'm just trying to think. I've never forgot, because whilst we've been talking about nudity and sex and stuff, I've been trying to think what the hell is in Cyberpunk, because of course that is a game that is coming up, which is a AAA title. You know, it's been branded everywhere as the must-play game of the year, blah blah blah. But I remember the first gameplay, titty, right? First 5 minutes, titty, right there. And I'm pretty sure they've said, yeah, we've got explicit. What's the word I'm looking for? That's the one. Sex moments, and also in the character creation menu, you can change the size of your genitalia, but also Saints Row had it, so like it's this weird. It's just
there's one more interesting aspect actually, and that is
just the one.
That's actually the point of interactivity. Let's take something like violence. Okay, you have violence in passive media such as movies and TV shows and books and whatever. There you perceive it. And you have the same thing with sexual content, such as porn or romantic, erotic movies, whatever. That's the same thing, because you're perceiving it passively. Now, in a violent video game, you're actually actively taking that action. Jesus Christ. Which is something that ideally you should not do in real life. Now, with the sexual topic of it, you actually have at least some form of opportunity to do that. You can, if you're an adult, you can go out and be like, you can meet people. That's not something that is represented by the violent part of video games that is often represented as part of this moral factor. So that might be a contributing factor as to why there's
because
less
people
of
can actually go out and have sex, or people can just jerk off.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay.
Which is also interactive.
True.
Of course, that might change in future generations.
I mean, yeah, but if you have more and more incels, maybe there's going to be a bigger market for that, like, porn stuff at that point. It's going to be like, no, I don't want to... Like, there's this, like, ugly fat guy with pimples and big glasses and stuff, and he's, like, thinking to himself, no, I don't want to fuck that fat bitch. And then he's, like, just basically trying to look for some type of supermodel or something himself, This was the biggest stereotype of an incel, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, it's funny when you think
about it. That's how a lot of those people, like a lot of those incel stereotypes are, I guess. They're like people who are like, they either look ugly or they just have no game and they just want someone who's completely out of their reach or something. Just like,
yeah, I actually saw an investigative report about it today from a German YouTube channel. They actually started undercover interviewing some people from a flat-out marketed incel website, like forum, and there it's very much the idea of only the good-looking people get the good-looking people.
But that's But the thing is, if you're average-looking, you can still get average-looking people fairly easily. Just go out a night and you'll find someone if you just have the intent to have a one-night stand. Well, I guess it's easier when you're like a student or something at that point. I think it's weirder.
Right.
Also easier if there's not a global pandemic spread.
Yeah, exactly.
I completely forgot about that.
Everyone.
But then I've been locked in.
Yeah,
I hardly ever go outside anyway, so.
Doing anything.
Boning.
Yeah, boning. Can you all wear masks when you're doing it,
Face
please?
Now I just imagine people entirely...
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's been a thing even before.
Now introducing
wear your mask. Exactly.
the Corona body condom. Can you imagine the Corona body condom? It's like a condom that you put over your entire body.
Wait. Oh my god, why does weird...
Are you horny yet?
Look like,
I want...
For context, I'm wearing
why
a mask.
does Weird's mask look like, Why does Wid's mask look like one of those? I can't remember what they're called, but the hats
capo
that,
or something. I don't know what it's called in
wear.
English.
Why is it?
Jesus Christ.
I'm just saying,
The
it
other
looks
one I
like
have,
one.
hold on. The other one I have is made out of a tablecloth.
Wow.
So is mine. That's fun.
That's flower patterns.
That's legit. That's
I just-
legitimately.
I
Like
just
the
wear
same
some
as I have.
underpants over my face.
That's
No,
the
I'm
one I wear.
joking.
Look at that.
Hey, for some people it might actually be easy to find a one-night stand while wearing a mask.
Ooh.
Whoa.
I am so
Are those people with those
No, he is not. I just want that. That is an empty. That is an empty apology.
people with those
Later he will
stereotypical
giggle about
British
that to
teeth
himself.
that they always talk about?
You should tweet that. You should tweet that.
Oh, how do you know I was from the UK?
yeah. Bram, we just wear the masks because to hide our horrible teeth. That's
See,
why,
I don't-
and we can easily get dates.
So
For context,
mean,
I smiled at the camera.
this is
Anyway,
completely
that
off
was
topic
fine.
like the rest of this, but
The pearly. Wow, I have great
I think
teeth.
I've said this
Great.
before. I
I
think
have
we said
really
this in the
good
previous
teeth.
podcast. Why are teeth so important in America? Like they can't. If you
I have great
if
teeth.
people who can hardly afford to basically survive a fucking flu are putting money into like getting white teeth or some shit. What the fuck's up with that?
Honestly, if I see a Brit, there was a contestant I think maybe 2 years ago on Love Island, and he like literally went to America to get surgery to have his teeth really white, and it looks wrong. If a Brit has a pure white tooth, they're ill.
I mean, if you
They're
have
just
white
ill.
teeth and
That's
like
it.
almost black gums from all the rot around it, then of course.
Yeah, but if you just have like clear
Yeah,
white
you need to
teeth,
see a
that just
doctor.
always like there has to be a bit. It has to be a bit off, otherwise it looks like you have like you put like chiclets in your mouth or something. It's like, hey, it's me. I have a fucking chewing gum in my mouth. Isn't that my teeth? Just kind of looks like that.
Yeah, that's what. Yeah, it's just stretched.
Okay, so the next time I start dating, I'll buy these Halloween like fang teeth that you can put in your mouth.
No, the glow in the dark
Just have
ones.
Perfect white teeth. Now everybody will love them. Yeah.
I would
So,
love to just.
That was a complete fucking tangent. That was a
Shut up.
complete fucking
Some of us
tangent.
love
That went
me.
nowhere on topic.
Yeah.
You know,
Oh god,
if
you're
the-
making me a video
if
game.
the topic was comparable to playing darts and there was like a darts board, which was actually the conversation, we would have basically just
We would have
tossed
hit
it
another player.
and just took out the barkeep's eye or something.
It's gone out the window. It's gone out the window, and it's punctured the tire of a lorry, and now the
think
lorry is
that's-
jackknifed
I
and
think
everyone's
that's
dead. That's
how
what's-
off topic we were. Yes, but that means that we kind of squeezed that morality
Wow.
argument part dry, I guess, because we really just went somewhere else. But
we really rinsed that
the
bitch.
thing is, we talked about VR and then the full-on integration.
Please stop doing that.
So at that point, we also still have the full-on like the argument of like everything accessibility for gaming, because I think Microsoft is doing a lot with that as well at this point, with making special controllers for people who
Yeah, we
can't
touched on that before,
use
like-
controllers because they may not have hands or something. I mean, that's a
I recently on Facebook, don't judge me, I was just browsing, like the Facebook mum I was, and I came across a video where this guy, he is really, really good at COD, like he's really, really good, and he plays via blowing air into tubes, like he's
that's
got
it.
3 different tubes. Yeah, and it's fucking amazing. I think he had to create it himself or like get someone to personalize it for him though, because like the accessibility options, I don't think games are terrible. Like for accessibility,
I mean, it kind of
That
depends
being
on what
said,
accessibility. Like, if you don't have
fucking
legs,
great.
you're gonna be able to play a lot of games. Some VR games may be harder, but I mean,
see, I'm trying because when people talk about accessibility, the first thing I pop into my mind is The Last of Us Part 2's options, which was fucking 3 pages worth of customizable things to make.
yeah,
your
that's a lot of,
gaming
with a lot of like
experience so
visual
much better.
there was a lot of stuff that had to do with like if
Very
you were
kind of half
visually
this, but-
impaired or if you're colorblind or that type of stuff. Because I know that Apex also has like colorblind settings, for example, which seems fair if you.
And in my opinion, that's something that should be part of pretty any big game release these days, because that's all software adjustments. That's just changing color palettes, just changing a few button mappings. Nothing that actually requires intensive work aside from the initial research to find out how to actually make it accessible. The problem really comes in when you talk about hardware accessibility, I think.
Oh, okay. I was about to say, so why is it so? What am I saying? Why is it so different? Why do not a lot of games fucking hell? I can't speak. Why do not a lot of games have these options?
I do think a lot of them just don't consider it to be a priority. In the end, it's of course something you have to put a little bit of effort in. And if you don't have
a lot of games already.
You are talking about
a lot of games already include crunch periods to get made. So, I guess the workers don't want to be like, maybe we should say something about accessibility, and the other guy's like, no. I don't want to have another 80-hour fucking work week. So just smacks him in the head and is like, won't talk about it. Yeah. I mean, I guess that's still a big problem, and that's games itself. But I don't really see anything change about that. But there's a lot of arguments going around because people like Jim Sterling are just fully against the crunch. But then there's other people who have said yeah, but see what they get paid when they make video games for that for their overtime, and then they said that basically compensates it.
Yeah, but a crunch is a crunch, and it's not very fair.
Yeah, that's
to just intensely tell them to do this one thing.
To be fair, I'm kind of with Jim Sterling on this side, because I'm a software engineer, and I could have gone into the games industry as a programmer, as a developer, and I've decided against it because I know that the working conditions are, while they are compensated, are still not in the end worth to live for. I've talked to a few software engineers who actually left the games industry because of it, and even if you do get compensated for it, you're still putting in a different type of cost, which is your mental and physical health. And with some extreme cases, like we've seen with what have we seen them with? We have seen them with Ubisoft. We've seen them with let me think. We've partially seen them with
Red Dead had a crunch.
Yeah, Rockstar. We've seen them with what is it? Naughty Dog partially. And there's something that there's a continuous pattern of more than just your average one-off complaints. And if there is this type of pattern, then there's something concerning and something.
But what I don't get, and this is, I think it's somehow, I think labor laws are just different in different countries, but what I personally don't get about that is why they would even need crunch periods, because if I look at it, people who work more than 40 hours, scientifically proven, after that point, even before 40 hours, I think it's 36 to 38 somewhere, people start, they're just less effective after that point. They just aren't as effective as they would normally be, and so the work that they put in, then they have to pay those people more, so because they're doing overtime is more expensive normally. Over here it's more expensive as well. So I just kind of ask myself, why isn't it cheaper to just get more people and just have individuals do less hours?
Yeah, but
how or is that just...
The problem is you're considering long-term employment, as in people constantly doing overtime for the rest of their life.
Yeah.
That would be very ineffective. The point is you can actually make people do a lot of work in a short period of time while still being somewhat effective. If you just do it for, let's say, 3 months, you can still squeeze that little bit out of it. But the point is, depending on your labor rights, you can't just let them go afterwards and replace them with someone else. And that's a lot of what a lot of big game companies are doing right now.
I think video games, like now with the the current structure that you have with a lot of businesses, standard business, you have your boss, the person with the money, then you have high paid CEOs and all that type of shit. I feel like that type of structure isn't really the good structure for this industry. I feel like more like just a cooperative type setup would be better for video games, where basically everyone works on the project and is kind of part of the team and co-owner of the company at that point. I feel like something like that would make more sense in a video game setup, even with AAA. That something would move more that way, where you basically have the people who work on the game are basically owners of the company, and depending on how well the game does, they basically get more out of it themselves.
Yeah, that is a setup that you see a lot with indie studios, and there it works rather well if the game performs successful. But the problem is, as soon as you start going into the big leagues with AAA, you start talking an insane, unfathomable amount of money, and there you go back into the usual rules of capitalism of people trying to get their biggest share of the pie.
To be honest, I was watching a video yesterday, and it was about EA, you know, the shittest developer in the world. And I honestly never comprehend how much money it takes to make a game. And then they were talking about Anthem, you know.
Where did all that money go?
Love them to remember. And I think they put they put basically a blockbuster's worth of money, like $200 million into it. And of course,
I mean, they could have put it in the toilet.
Came out like it did, for a very different reason. Well, no, the thing is, okay, so I'll very briefly tell the story, but so
yes, a story-based company that actually fucking made Dragon Age games.
Yeah. No. So no. In fairness, this is all EA's fault because so they spent 4 years. They spent 4 years building up the world, like creating concept art, being in pre-production, and then you know when we saw Anthem for the first time at the 2017 E3, I think it was the 2017 E3. Do you want to know what was funny about that? They hadn't even started making the fucking game back then. That was all a pre-rendered thing that came from nowhere.
I think we joked about
Anthem
that.
Anthem wasn't even in production. It was still in pre-production. Yeah. So then EA turned around to BioWare and they were like, okay, you have to start making this game. And they spent 1.5 years making the game, and they couldn't.
Want to hear a fun fact about Anthem?
Always.
The internal project name for Anthem at EA was actually called Dylan. As in Bob Dylan. As in the one that will change the entire industry.
Wow.
Look where that has gone.
Yeah.
Well, it has changed the entire industry. Let your dev team know what the game should look like before you tell everyone else what it looks like.
Just to put, actually, if you are not that familiar with the video games industry,
well, they did get one thing in common with Bob Dylan. If you hear Bob Dylan live, he's not the best singer, to be honestly. He's a good songwriter, and no, I've heard live recordings, and his nasal voice can sometimes also be off key when it's live. He's not the best singer. He's an amazing songwriter. That's to his credit. And
to be honest, there's loads of singers out there who are shit.
And to be honest, I feel like they did capture that aspect with Anthem. It's.
So what were you gonna say?
For the people that are maybe not familiar, maybe they are familiar with video games, but not the industry behind it. To put it all into perspective. For example, the biggest highest grossing video game series of all time, Mario by Nintendo, as of last year is estimated to have generated a lifetime revenue of approximately $32.5 billion. That's not a number you can even gross. And then there's something like Pokemon, 19.5. Call of Duty, $18 billion. FIFA.
Jesus, there's a gap.
$11 billion with FIFA. Final Fantasy, also $11 billion. And that's only counting revenue sales, so that's not counting in-app purchases, that's not counting marketing money, that's not counting something like esports, where also a lot of money is involved. There is an unfathomable amount of a lot of zeros with a dollar sign afterward in video games, and that's why these issues
then the golden question would also be at that point, like we see that we have video games with basically video game companies where it's just like a few people at the helm, just a few people leading a company that basically just want to see return on investment for their investors, and that's basically the most important thing at that point.
Weird. What did Weird got really shocked at one? Which one was it?
Including in-app purchases, Candy Crush has generated a lifetime revenue of
Jesus.
$7.5
Ouch.
billion.
By
That's
what I
not
was saying. So,
surprising.
with indie games having like a lot of them having like a more different structure where basically everyone is like a co-owner of the company to some degree, and if the games do well, everyone basically does well. Do you think that there is a chance that that the gap, because there is still a quality gap when it comes to certain aspects of video games, you still see the difference between a AAA title and even the better indie games. Do you think there's that gap is ever going to be filled? Do you think ever a company that's basically not really all that funded by like outside investors and just basically just works on its own and its own basically revenue it makes over time, and just basically still keeps that cooperative theme going where everyone basically is a co-owner, everyone who's in the who's involved in the company is basically co-owner of the company to some degree? Do you think those games can ever compete with the AAA games, like in all sorts of quality? Because I know at some points these we can argue about story wise, some of these games that are just indie games do have better storytelling than some AAA games. But the combination of that, like the storytelling, the graphics, the controls, do you think that at one point these like an indie company will catch up without becoming just another AAA company, like, or exactly the same as them? That's
What I do believe eventually is that there's gonna be a few indie games that get so vastly successful that they can compare to the income of a triple game. I do believe there's one time going to be that one indie game that everyone just loves. We've seen something similar, even though it was not revenue generating, with Undertale. People were going crazy shit, batshit insane about Undertale, and a lot. Well, I know a few people are indifferent about the game, but personally I would say it's a good game, and I really hope that eventually there's going to be a few of these small team and small developers that see this type of success without selling out. As far as maintaining that, I do think that's something that will always be wishful thinking, because you see that in every type of industry. As soon as you got a little bit of equity in your company, you will start changing the way you behave, because you have to survive. Because there's always that one bigger fish, and if you don't.
So that brings us to a golden question for people who may just be like more morally inclined and do still want to play video games. At that point, do you think people who wanna do you think people who want to be like more moral about it, do you think they would ever be able to play something comparable to a AAA game, or do you think they should probably at that point stick to indie? Do you think the same quality or higher quality than what we get now in something like a Red Dead or Last of Us 2 is ever going to be possible without all those horrible malpractices behind it?
Yeah.
I do think the quality,
It's just, like Weird said, to a level, the practices can only go so far before you have to change something to evolve and stay afloat and keep up with the competition. So I want it, it is wishful thinking. I'm like, I want the small guy to really just punch the big guy in the gut.
Everybody loves an underdog.
Exactly. But that, it just feels like an impossible task and a very slim.
But do you think we will see any improvement with the AAA sphere itself? Like, do you think we will see some of these malpractices disappear there?
Nope.
Hopefully.
Well, maybe surface level, yes. Maybe surface level. But honestly, until maybe a good, decent, I want to say 20, maybe 30 years in the future, maybe, our generation might sweep in and be like, okay guys, what the fuck is this? Like, this has been going on too long. Let's pull our shit together here. Because this is weird, but I just think that our generation might just fix a lot of stuff because we're very aware and we're very considerate in parts. I genuinely think, I know Weird looks at me funny, but I believe that because of how loudly we've shouted about other topics before, and I know that sounds like it's going a bit political, but
Yeah.
I think
But it is
until a
political.
good
No problem
generation.
with
Absolutely
that.
is political.
Yeah, exactly. But I think there is a slate of people that just need to remove themselves entirely before we can get a better environment. But again, wishful thinking.
As far as
Solid
people
answer.
morally adapting to the situation, and even you saying, okay, I think our generation will fix a lot of the issues that persist. How many people wear Nike shoes? Let's think about that. A lot. We all know these are made in Chinese sweatshops with terrible conditions, with terrible
I
effects
agree.
on the environment, on people, on human resources, on resources in general, and still everybody keep buying them, despite the fact that they're at least theoretically aware of it. I think there's, while I wouldn't say that working for EA is as bad as working in a Chinese sweatshop, I do think the situation is at least in the way comparable, that you can say, I don't think people
because
will care.
theoretically and morally, the question and the statement still have a very similar theme.
Exactly, and I think we'll see the same results, unfortunately.
Yeah. I mean, there's still arguably also a difference with the fact that if you live in a country where there is basically a certain, I would say, a situation that's more universal, that's going to still be different than if you live in a country where your situation is actually fairly unique. Like, for example, if there's a country where everyone gets paid shit, it's going to be less of a difference than if you live in a country where most people get to just work their 40 hours or 38 hour shifts, and you have to work 80 hour shifts like a lot of the time. So that's still different, and to some degree as well. So these things have, like, they are comparable to some degree, but they're entirely different at the same time as well.
Again,
absolutely.
we're just.
But at
We're
the same time,
these
do
things.
you think, like, this is some of the, I mean, this is almost a laughable question in my own experience, but do you think these malpractices could get solved by raising game prices to $70 or euros or whatever instead of the 60 that's standard now? Do you think that's gonna get rid of crunch? No? No? Nobody thinks?
No.
I think that's going to increase it.
Yeah, they're gonna wanna put...
Yeah.
It's.
I don't.
I think it's.
I just.
It honestly makes me sad that people defend this type of thing, because in my opinion, that is hiding incredible malpractice on the cover of virtuousness, and
Yeah.
I'm baffled that people actually.
You know what
say
also
this is
kind
a
of
good thing.
confused me when Griff said, like, the Anthem was like the price of a movie, basically. The set that they invested, with its production.
Yeah, with its
But
production.
a movie doesn't cost a movie doesn't cost 60 euros to buy after that, right? Have you ever paid 60 euros for a movie? So I don't get that. Like, if that type of money goes in there,
I know.
And
I
that's
thi- I
only
think it's only
content.
because, like,
And that's only retail price, right? With something like Anthem, you have a ton of microtransactions that also generate revenue streams for the company, in this case AA Publishing it. And you don't
Oh,
have...
sorry. No, I was right. 200.
And you have nothing comparable in any entertainment industry. You don't have, to quote Ben Crawshaw in this case, you don't have a movie theater where somebody in the middle of the movie says, okay, can the silver ticket owners please leave the room while the gold ticket owners watch this one particular scene. That doesn't exist. That's a complete different new thing that is really not put under any form of regulation. Because
is like the
has never
sales
been there
numbers
before.
for movies, are they that much higher? Like, if a movie, so let's say a movie can cost like the same. Let's say a movie and a game cost the same for once. Let's say that. Like, for example, Anthem was the price of a blockbuster movie. Does a blockbuster
go.
movie sell 3 times as many copies as a game then to justify that difference in costs? For the end product, for the end user?
I think it's only because I think the only argument like, you know, games costing, I'm gonna say £50 because in this country they cost £50. The only way a game in this country costs 60 or above is that like it's super special edition. Like that's it, or you get a digital deluxe version. Apart from that, every standard edition is at least like £45 or £50. But the thing is with a video game is if you pay that money and then you get whatever you want out of it, like that game can be as many hours of you doing whatever you want to do in it. But with a movie, you go in, you sit down, and you're just not forced, because, you know, you're there to be there, but you're forced to see the movie in the way that the movie gives it to you. Like with a video game, like if we take an open world like The Witcher, yes, it has a set story, but you can go and do all the quests at whatever speed and for however long you want to, and I think that's why. But I don't
If I
love it, but
if I may break in there real quick, counterpoint linear games.
yeah, no, exactly.
Well, some games when you finish
So
them, you
that's what
finish
I
them,
mean,
and there's
but
not much replayability. And sometimes a movie you can rewatch that. I'm not one to rewatch movies all that often. So I don't really buy them. And same with video games. I think
I
a
rewatch
few
movies
exceptional
all the
video
time.
games that I've played multiple times, like Resident Evil 4. So
Honestly, only in lockdown have I started replaying a lot of video games. Like the lockdown has made me go, I'd love to play all these games again. But I think it's also because we're at the end of a console generation, and like I've really enjoyed this console generation, so I'm like, I want to go back and I want to enjoy all these things again. Like I did Uncharted, I'm gonna do Lost Legacy, and then I'm gonna do Spider-Man in a minute. So
I guess we can say that
there is replay value.
there are probably reasons, and I mean, maybe I'm getting this wrong. Maybe games cost more than we think. I don't know, but there probably has to be something that justifies the fact that a game costs so much more than a movie, for example. Because I think the movie is what like.
I do believe direct revenue as far as how many copies are sold or how many tickets are taken for a movie theater. I think the movie industry has
I think
a
that's
far
probably
bigger
it.
number in that case. But I do not think
no,
that
it
actually
does.
I don't think that actually justifies a price tag of $60 and above, because as mentioned, the games industry has so many different types of revenue streams that are also accounted for. It mathematically, it does not make sense.
That's the thing. But well, I guess the problem with those revenue streams that when it comes to like for example loot boxes is those things they're fairly, if not almost entirely unpredictable to see how they were gonna, especially when they make the game. Like if the game gets popular, you basically have your reoccurring stream. Like, you know, okay, these people, the last time we did this event, people bought this amount of this, these loot boxes, these packs, so we know what a recurring revenue would be for that time of year, maybe. So they can check that type of stuff. But when it's a new game, I mean, I guess at that point that there's a justification for the price. But I feel like the price of a game should go down rapidly if a lot of microtransactions are sold, right? In that case. It doesn't. No, that's not justifiable.
Yeah. There's been this infamous commercial about a company, I forgot the name. Jim Sterling used it a lot in his clips. Basically, an analytical company of, player behavior to see how they would be susceptible to purchasing microtransactions or transactions in general, with their infamous marketing quote, turning players into payers. And I think that we really see the whole way this industry is going money-wise.
But I feel like that's one thing that we could talk a long time about. I think we should probably move on to one thing we didn't really get to speak about last time, and I think this is going to be our last topic, because we went into the far future to some degree with like future technologies that could potentially happen. But what about the next step, next generation, which for us is probably, I don't know if anyone's interested to buy a computer replacer fridge thing that allows you to play computer games on your TV. The Xbox.
What?
The Xbox.
Oh, I was like, where the fuck is he going with that?
I just have one reason why I'm sticking to PlayStation, and that's just the fact that otherwise I would just go ahead and buy a strong PC and I would be able to play those games.
See, it's funny that you say that, Bram, because I have, after the PlayStation 5 reveal event and Xbox, like not really being an Xbox fanboy because I love the PlayStation exclusives and that's where my friends play, after seeing all that, I went ahead and brought a £1,000.
See, that's what I mean. Now you don't need an Xbox at all.
Because I was like, there is nothing coming. But that's what I mean, because the thing is, Microsoft is doing a great thing, like with their Game Pass, where you can buy it for £15 a month and you get all these games. And there is a great list of games on there that I am going to download and I'm just going to play because I want to.
I don't know if for someone who plays like me, Game Pass is like a very good option, because I'm somebody who would sometimes not touch a game for like 2 years and then go back. But if that's the case and the game would no longer be available, which is possible if it's that type of service. There's the only problem that I have with the Game Pass is there's no ownability. You don't own anything. Even if the game would be I mean, some games make it impossible now anyway, so if you put a game in, it's like, your game is out of date, you can't play this game, update please. I mean, those games will probably also not be playable anymore despite you having the disc at one point, but I mean,
there's a very interesting topic you're talking about here. If we consider games going digital, we already see it with current console generations, with games being able to download very fast and then
or with Netflix. Somebody saying like, "Hey, you have to watch this," and I was like, "Oh yeah, I'll get around to it next month." And you watch like, "Oh, I didn't see that. Is that no? It's not on Netflix anymore." Oh, okay, then I won't watch it. I mean,
exactly. And we already see this problem. For example, it has already been a problem during the PlayStation 3 days. There's been a video game called on the Xbox Live Arcade, actually. There's been a game called Scott Pilgrim vs. the World. Side-scrolling beat 'em up of the same cartoon, of the same comic and movie series, and that was removed from the stores because they didn't want to support it. But people bought a license to play that game. Now that is actually a complete jurisdiction. How do you do that? How do you acquire the rights to play at the time you buy it, or indefinitely? And then when you go into something like a Netflix for video games, such as Game Pass, do you actually get the right to play the games that are being advertised to you at this moment? And should that be the case,
which
it's just a complete part of media consumption and media acquisition that has not been there before. We see the same thing with Netflix. We had the same problem. They still
the
have
problem
this
only grows
problem.
with.
Why am I allowed to watch this movie but not another?
The problem only grows with the fact there's more competition in that, and I feel like that could be a problem in the future.
Yeah.
Because now we're talking about console exclusivity, but we may get developer exclusivity and developer passes and that type of stuff at one point, where everyone basically does their own thing, and then that's gonna be a nightmare, because then a Game Pass won't be enough anymore. Then you need the Game Pass for the Xbox, you need a Bethesda Game Pass, you need a Ubisoft Game Pass, you need
Stadia.
You do. Oh god, let's not get into that.
And that's
I'm not
interesting
doing that.
topic. As a software and network engineer, I just want to quickly introduce the topic of SaaS, SaaS, software as a service, which is what these subscription services are. Right? You pay a monthly fee or a yearly fee, and you get software as return, ready to be used whenever you want. There's another possibility which is called IaaS. Infrastructure as a service. Amazon has been doing it for years. Half of the internet is running on Amazon servers. The point of not having to own a device that does your stuff, but instead subscribing to that device to run what you want to. For example, video games that you then factually own, which would remove the issue of game ownership, at least partially. And I think that's something that is completely unexplored, and I hope that that's something that is explored in the future, instead of, hey, you can play this game now, and instead have, hey, you have the possibility to play games.
It also comes down to the fact at that point, because now we had basically what people called decline in piracy as well. With a lot of stuff, we had that with movies and TV series. All those illegal streaming websites, they all got less traffic when something like as, let's say, it's fairly cheap to have a Netflix, to be honest, compared to like buying movies every now and then and all those other options that you used to have back in the day. So a lot of people don't really feel the need to go and illegally download, even in countries where the country doesn't really give a fuck about that and just doesn't really go after people as much, or doesn't really make it too hard for people. But I feel like if at one point everything becomes too splintered and goes off into the many directions, I feel like that's going to come back. Like, you talk about game ownership, all those games are going to stay available one point or another. Like, at one like, either it's going to be one build of the game that somebody has illegally and then distributes illegally. I mean, a lot of this stuff is never really going to disappear, but I feel like the actual... due to the fact of taking away ownership, I feel like some people are going to have to resort back to piracy more than they do now.
Yeah, it's all about, usability. How are you actually accessing the stuff you want? And Netflix had the right idea, but they didn't take into account that they would have.
But they did have they had one good thing. They had a long time without too much competition, which means that they get associated with that, because that's also the reason why we say the Netflix of gaming, for example. So we don't say the Hulu of gaming, or we don't say the Amazon Prime of gaming.
Yeah, and it's like when we say Google that. So
nobody says, "I'm gonna Bing that quickly."
Netflix it. Like, yeah, exactly.
I mean, I would advise you to search a mental institution if you were to Bing something. But
I'm gonna Internet Explorer.
That just reminds me of now you just did this
Anyway.
ASDF sketch, but I just imagine.
I'm gonna do an internet.
I'm gonna do a Google. I'm gonna do a Bing. Huh? That's not what I was looking for.
Suicide.
No, I was
hotline.
Googling
Bing,
Google.
to kill yourself.
So yeah, we just really went off track with the PlayStation 5 itself, which, yeah, it looks like a waffle iron, but I think if I'm...
Such a terrible design. And it's massive! Oh my god,
that's
why is it so
that's a bit of a
fucking
concern
big?
if you think about like possible portable VR technology in the future. Imagine having that type of power and rendering power and SSD in a VR headset. See how big that PlayStation 5 is? Can you imagine what type of headset you would have to have? Like a big dome on your head, like you look like some alien motherfucker walking around, like, woo!
I don't want to think about it.
just look funny. And then they also have I think it's a fairly recent type of cooling system, like these steel fins that you have on some like more like, if you look at business end computers, like some higher end business computers, they have like these steel fins coming up, which are a type of cooling apparently. And I think that's why you have those like weird things in the PlayStation 5 as well. I think that's all supposed to be cooling, because everyone complains that the PlayStation 5 sounds like an airplane taking off whenever it's trying to cool itself down. So I think maybe they're addressing that problem, and maybe that's why everything's so spaced out and big, and why they have those openings in it.
Oh yeah, it's absolutely to do with the cooling issue, and because the two main problems were the cooling issue with the PlayStation 4 and also the downloading of files, like copying files and whatever. That was like, file management was shit. I have an external hard drive, which is 1 terabyte for my PlayStation 4, and I have the base,
which is nothing for a
500
PlayStation.
gigabytes
So
for
horrible
PlayStation.
lately, right?
So I have two.
Oh my god.
No, I know, but I have two options to download stuff, and when I tried to pre-download The Last of Us Part 2, I had 600, maybe 700 gigabytes left on my 1 terabyte external. But because the really fucking shitty saving system on the PlayStation 4, it would not. It was like, there's no space. Yeah. What? There's 700 gigabytes.
We also yesterday realized, but that may be a PlayStation Pro versus PlayStation regular PlayStation thing. our files for the games, like our games, were literally bigger than yours. Like we were talking about the same games.
Yeah, you had a disc. He has a disc version of The Last of Us Part 2, and his game
110
was
or 120 or
what?
something.
No. 120. So his is 120 gigabyte. He has a disc version of the game. I got it digital. It was 71 gigs.
But it does. I
What
say
the
this
fuck
is a
is that
PlayStation Pro, so does it detect that and install like different texture things or something?
Could be.
Could be that. That's the only thing I could think of. Not that you're gonna.
Anyway.
It's played on some kind of shitty TV, so I don't think you see much difference with the Pro. The fact that it's just, well, it just runs smoother. That's all I can say. But yeah, a good question as well is, and for those of us who are gonna buy a PlayStation 5, are you gonna get it with or without a disc tray? Uh-huh.
Oh, I'll get it with. When I eventually get it, I'll get it with.
Same here. I just love having a collection on the shelf.
My internet. I was gonna say, first off, I love having the disc because if I have it downloaded, that's why I'm annoyed. I have a download version of The Last of Us Part 2. I only got the download version because of quarantine and like Corona. Otherwise, I would have got a disc version. But I like having the disc because I'm like, then I can go back to it one day and go, I can play this. Wait, no, I lost the license because like we'd say, what? Yeah.
That's
stupid companies.
And that there, I actually have to say, I'm very happy that both Microsoft and Sony, and to an extent Nintendo, with this generation, still went with what can be considered a physical video game console, because there have been open discussions at Microsoft saying
they already wanted to do that last
digital,
generation, actually.
such as
Right?
video game subscription services. Yeah, exactly. And I'm happy they didn't, because I don't think both the market and
but this could be the last generation they do it.
yeah, exactly, and I think it will be, but I don't think right now the market is not ready for that, as both as consumers
internet
and
could
ethics
not
around it
support
are
it.
concerned.
My internet could not. I mean, I can download games, but it takes me fucking forever.
Also,
Like, I'm downloading one right now.
even their own servers
Take
are
it
somewhat
all day.
limited, because if you have like a download speed of like a what is it, like 1,000 megabits per second or something, let's say you have a speed like that, I don't think it's gonna download at 1,000 megabits per second. I don't think that their servers maintain that speed either. Or am I wrong there?
Well, don't underestimate the power of server farms. There can be some.
But I know one thing. I know that
but,
I think it was what's it called, Origin on PC. I think they were limited to like 100 megabits per second downloads. Yes. And I normally have like
Is
a
that
300
true?
coming
That's why
in,
I
like
think
if
I
I
would download the
have like
Sims.
would be like cabled, and it's like, this is going rather slowly compared to anything else. I could have torrented anything just in that time. So this
I tell you what,
Steam also
is quite bad.
seems to be
Sometimes Steam's really
limited
bad.
in its download capacity.
Like Steam, like it's got good downloads, but if you catch it on a really shit day, it will just like stop the download. Like for a couple of months, there was a period where my Steam would just stop the download because it was like the network's gone. My internet would be fine. I'd be like on a call with someone.
I feel like
and
that's
it would
also
just suddenly drop, and I'm like, what the fuck?
Though I do actually believe that they're both, the whole software as a service and infrastructure as a service part will actually positively influence that, because you just have some machine somewhere in a server farm in Ireland that has perfect internet connection, perhaps a direct link, depending on what kind of provider you're talking to whatever you want.
What do you
And
think
there
is the
you can just have it
fastest
like
connection that anyone can have at this point? Like anyone? Like just in megabits or something?
Well, that depends on like what connection from where to where. Network engineering.
Yeah. I mean, what they could send out, like maximum maybe to.
It's just
I can't fathom
What?
anything above.
That's
30
fucking slow.
minutes. That's I live in a village. That's the best internet I get. I'll do an internet.
If I pay like a 15 euros a month extra, I would have like 1,000 megabits.
Right now, my
See, and you're
download
saying it's
speed
my
is
connection that
41
drops every time.
megabits. My upload is 6. Mine's shit. Look at that! But that's the thing. Like,
Well,
if you're
40
in a village,
To be honest though, 40 on an individual
That's nice to
device is enough for most things. But yes.
Actually, I take it back. It's probably British Telecom.
Fuck
you, BT!
But just to put it into context about what kind of traffic we're talking about, here we're of course just talking about like one household getting internet. But the amount of traffic that the whole internet is generating. For example, as part of my studies, I was actually once connected to the Amsterdam Internet Exchange directly. Internet Exchange are basically the biggest hubs that you have on the internet. There is a few hundreds around the world that are all interconnected. And in peak traffic in 2018 was 6,322 terabits per second.
Jesus Christ, I can't even fathom.
This, of course, from everyone connected to that hub at that point, but just to put it all into perspective, how much internet we are dependent on right now and how much that we need.
I know it's bad how much internet I'm personally.
And that was in 2018. Now imagine right now with the corona going on.
I was gonna say, imagine the.
So we need
quarantine. Jesus.
And that is just one internet.
Like remember over quarantine where streaming services were like, we have to tone down the quality you're gonna stream at because there are so fucking many of you, we can't handle.
I guarantee you, some network engineering intern somewhere was crying.
Oh, he was. I could hear several people crying.
Wait, actually, I am on the website of the Amsterdam Internet Exchange. Current traffic. Remember, the peak traffic in 2018 was 6.3 terabit. Current traffic is 6.5. The peak of today was 8.1.
Oh my god.
So all we have to say with that is, with the right evolution going the right way, like Steam-based gaming, like just like cloud-based gaming would definitely be extremely plausible. It's just gonna be there's gonna be regions who will still have problems with it.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Yeah, exactly. That's it's not the way they connect to the server.
But as long as they can't, as long as they can't do it for like, as long as they can't guarantee it for like the majority of people to be able to use the technology properly, they can't really get rid of the physical copies fully at that point. So I don't think, I don't know if we're gonna be there next generation. Like if the PlayStation 6 comes out or something, do you think internet speeds around the world are gonna have evolved far enough for that?
Hopefully. Well, let's think about other issues first.
Well, there's of course a theoretical limit, which is light speed, but I think we'll still see some.
I mean, we're far from light speed now, so let's not think about that for now. You're not gaming at the speed of light. It's not like you can emulate the Flash or anything.
That'd be great though. I'd love to game at the speed of light.
So, we're talking. Yeah, it's. Wow, there's not much to talk about there's not much to talk about the next generation, to be honest. Though it's just basically the question of what you were gonna get, and then we have the exclusivity versus.
The thing is, there's still a massive question mark on the next console generation because we still don't know the price. They don't have a release date. Some of the exclusive games are still yet to be announced, or I don't fully actually know what's coming out when the PlayStation 5 launches. I think the Spider-Man game's going to come out, but Horizon has no fucking launch date. And with Xbox, you've got...
I'm probably going to have to buy it when it comes out, because otherwise I may waste the money that I would have for it. Because it comes out exactly at the end of the year when I normally would get my tax returns and that type of stuff, which would normally be enough for that. So, whatever. So I guess it's probably going to be when it comes out that I kind of... because if I wait, I'm going to waste those tax returns on something else.
Why?
Taxes, oh no, how adult.
That is adult! Do you remember paying them when you were a kid?
I gotta talk to you after this about something, actually. It just reminds me. Never mind.
Oh god.
I'm in trouble.
I mean, your country has weird taxes, because I've heard that you have to pay taxes even if you don't have an income.
I know!
No, that shouldn't exist. You shouldn't have to pay taxes if you don't have an income. Fuck you, UK. Let's move away from that. Yes.
Okay, this is definitely getting off topic, Bram.
I think we've talked about generally everything.
Okay, Mom.
we're still very
We're at
much
2 hours
removed
20.
from a future where you can just I don't know, lift your hair up and just plug yourself into a video game and just stay there and just enjoy your video game.
Hey, Ready Player One will be.
I mean, that's beyond.
reality
Oh, no, no,
world.
That's
I
beyond
gotta
Ready
tell you
Player
what the
One,
peak
right? Because
video
Ready
game
Player
will
One
be.
still uses peripherals. That's just controlling games
Maybe
with your
it has
mind.
been weird.
That's just a step beyond that. Just a step beyond that.
No. The peak video game will just be a needle right into the serotonin center of your brain and a button that makes it go up by 1 every time you press it. And I guarantee you, Ubisoft
You have to
will
pay
get a
every time you
massive
press the
kick out of
button.
that.
Microtransactions.
Yeah, 'cause that's EA.
Buy.
Then it goes up
Buy
fast.
1 push. Buy 5 pushes. Buy 10 pushes. Buy 20. Deluxe pack.
It will just be the cookie clicker meets the
The
Clockwork Orange.
Buy the
See, now I
golden
know
click
that that's
button.
your theory. I'm never gonna touch anything that says that. Because I'll be like, oh no, that will be an episode of Black Mirror. Actually,
Well,
it has been an episode of Black Mirror.
Okay.
Anyway,
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
when it comes
anyway,
to future and current, we have touched a lot of topics. We have touched some more topics than we did last time, so maybe it wasn't too bad that we had to redo or reshoot or reshoot is hard to say when it's just fucking audio. But just redo this thing, re-record
I could
it.
shoot myself.
Yeah, that's maybe
Hey,
the best word to say. So before we go, do you guys have anything to plug? Griff, Weird?
No, I'm
So
not
it's nothing
working
to
on
do.
anything currently, so sorry.
well then I'll take your time. Hi! Have you ever wanted
Thank
to see
you.
the worst channel on YouTube? No, just kidding. As mentioned at the
They're
beginning,
already on it.
I have a YouTube channel called Weird Wolf, youtube.com/weirdwolf. I used to post a lot of gaming content, and I'll get back to that. I wasn't able to do because of the Rona, but I'll get back to it. I also will do
That's
some
his excuse.
software-related stuff, as I mentioned it a lot of times during this podcast. I did a lot of software engineering and operating engineering and IT security, so I might get into that as well. If you're interested, then hop on over. That
Yeah.
will be very
He
soon.
he just wants to be the Michael Reeves of programming.
Griff, I studied IT. I'm not a cool kid. What the fuck are you smoking?
Lol.
It was fucking ironic, you dipshit.
See, that's why I
Okay.
don't get it.
Well,
Because I'm not a cool kid.
Exactly.
so
Only adding to my
if you
levels
check
of
in the
hilarity.
description below, you will also. I'll put a link to the channels and put a link to the even the Rainbow Beast Twitch channel, because there may be a rare occurrence where there could be a stream there. Who knows? I'll put all of my
That'd be
stuff
great.
there as well. If you want to get fancy, which is definitely necessary with all this Corona shit going on, I would recommend you going to my Redbubble store, which is called
Yeah, Griff has the
Gatriarchy. There's a
OnlyFans.
lot of funny shirts there. Yes, and there's a bit of something for everyone. And the shirts are all naughty, so I think you
Ooh.
His stickers on the back
a lot
of
of
my
people
laptop, so go
wouldn't
buy
dare
them.
like. You can show how big your balls
that's
are
your
by just wearing
guarantee.
those shirts out, because nobody dares wearing those. Come on, just. And that's where we're gonna end this one. What's the next topic gonna be? Well, we have a lot of topics. I'll just pick one, and I guess we'll see then. It's still a mystery for now. But until then, I'll catch you later.